Hidaka Masamune was starting another normal day at high school. A normal day for him, at least. As usual, everyone was sitting or walking in pairs, leaving Hidaka all alone. The only time he ever spoke was when he was the target of bullying. This time, Saeki Kenta and his two cronies, the ones who always picked on Hidaka, approached him. They tossed some coins at Hidaka and ordered him to go get them some juice. Hidaka was used to being treated like an errand boy. He felt as if he were cursed with a slave's mentality, existing only to complete tasks. Hidaka was ready to do as the bullies asked, but just then, Hawachi came up from behind and confronted them. She asked why they always chose to bully Hidaka. She asserted that in high school, society should be past the stage of bullying. Saeki denied bullying Hidaka, saying he just wanted the kid to get him some juice, like any friend would. Hawachi didn't buy their excuse, so she looked over at Hidaka, asking if he was okay with being their errand boy. Whether it was out of fear of the bullies or a desire to be accepted, Hidaka forced a smile and insisted that the guys weren't doing anything wrong and that Hawachi should just drop it. Hidaka had been a target of bullying his entire life, and he realized that 4 parties were involved in the process: the onlookers, the supporters, the bullies, and the victims. Everyone liked to think they weren't involved. But in the end, it was a process, and everyone played their part perfectly. Hidaka Masamune walked to the top floor of the school building. He knew they didn't sell juice up there. As he walked, Hidaka lamented how broken he was. When he reached the roof, he told himself that it wasn't him who was broken, but the world he lived in. He couldn't go on living in such a terrible world. It was a long way down, but Hidaka felt less fear and more rejection. He let himself fall. As he fell, he thought that he didn't necessarily want to die. He just couldn't bear this life anymore. And that was thanks to all the people who had made his life miserable. It was almost over. Hidaka closed his eyes and prepared to welcome death's cold embrace. On this day, did Hidaka Masamune die or not? He started to hear different voices around him, forcing him to open his eyes. Maybe this was what the afterlife looked like. He looked around and saw a man sitting on a throne, who he assumed was the king. The king had several officials standing around him, who were all expressing their joy at having succeeded. But what had they succeeded in? The king cheerfully welcomed the heroes to his world, which made Hidaka look around and realize that all of his classmates were here. He didn't understand how he'd gone from falling off a building to ending up in a strange place with all of his classmates. The king introduced himself as Johannes Greyberg, the 47th king of the Kingdom of Greyberg. He understood that all the newly summoned heroes would be confused about why they were here, so he offered an explanation. According to him, his kingdom had been stuck in a long war against magical beings, and the war showed no signs of stopping anytime soon. In their desperation, they had resorted to summoning heroes to see if they could break the stalemate and end the war. According to legend, summoned heroes would possess amazing skills and stats. At this point, Saeki couldn't stop himself from speaking up to the king. He questioned the king's intentions and bravely declared that they had been kidnapped by the king himself. His speech was cut short by an explosion from the king, who was trying to show the heroes what magic looked like. The king apologized, saying he thought a demonstration would be a more effective way to explain. However, this latest display only made Saeki even angrier. He almost stepped forward to confront the king directly, but someone pulled him back and told him to stop. Hidaka pointed out that the king had plenty of guards around, so they couldn't pick a fight with him. At that moment, Saeki wasn't even listening to him, but he gradually calmed down as a few other classmates shared the same sentiment. King Johannes assured the heroes that he meant them no harm. Summoning them was a difficult task, and it would make no sense to kill the very heroes they had worked so hard to summon. The king continued addressing the class, informing them that they had each received extraordinary power in their class and could access their stats just by saying status. Those with the hero class were especially blessed. Saeki was the first to call up his status window. His class was Paladin, and his title was Hero. A Paladin is ranked among the top tier of knights, possessing the attributes of a priest as well. The next person to call out his status was Ichijo Yukimura. His class was Hero, and his title was also listed as Hero. One by one, the class members checked their statuses and were all pleased with what they saw. Hidaka thought about how these people were getting another chance to enjoy an even better life, even though they already had good lives before. Now, he decided to check his own stats to see if he might be one of the favored ones in this world. Hidaka accessed his status window and saw that his class was Healer. And unlike the others, his title read Reincarnated. No one else had the Healer class, so he asked one of the officials, Ares, to learn more about it. Ares bluntly stated that a Healer is a recovery class, the weakest among the hero classes. No one else had the Healer class, so he asked one of the officials, Ares, to learn more about this class. Ares stated bluntly that a Healer is a recovery class, the weakest among the hero classes. Hidaka was utterly devastated, and to make matters worse, Saiki came over to mock him. Another official asked Hidaka why his title said Reincarnated instead of Hero. Hidaka revealed that he had jumped off a roof right before they were summoned. The official said nothing and simply left with a questioning look on her face about his intentions. Ares began to tell the new class of heroes that they would be enrolled in a training academy for a while to become strong enough to fight magical entities. She led the class into a magic circle that would take them to the student dormitories. Saiki didn't miss the chance to mock him, continuing to taunt Hidaka about being with this weak class, even calling him a suicidal idiot. Hidaka couldn't take it anymore. He thought about how his life back home was no different from the one he was about to experience in this new world. He didn't want to be around people like Saiki anymore. Hidaka declared that he had no intention of going with them, leaving everyone stunned by his decision. Ares then revealed that, from the moment they realized he had a weak profession, they had planned to send him somewhere else. The new location would be random, and he could end up anywhere. Not even they could predict where he would go. Ares accused Hidaka of being a burden among the heroes summoned to save the people's lives, saying he was guilty of wasting their time and effort. Before Ares pushed Hidaka out of the circle, the young man cried out, vowing to destroy the entire country and every single one of them, dragging them all down to hell. It was a bold declaration from someone who was likely about to die. With that, she sent him through the circle into what she believed was his inevitable death. Sometime later, Hidaka found himself in a very dark place. He felt tired, as if he had been walking for a very long time. He remembered what led him here, the fact that he was too weak and had been cast aside. Hidaka checked his status again and noticed something interesting. He had a disorder called Otherworld Longing Syndrome, Level 1. This syndrome was a disorder suffered by those who longed for another world. After what felt like an endless walk, with a wooden torch in hand, Hidaka Masamune finally stumbled upon 3 boxes. He guessed they might be treasure chests, but he was also well aware that they could contain something dangerous. Even so, he had already walked a perilous path to near death, so he decided to open them. 3 boxes in the middle of nowhere. What could possibly go wrong? Hidaka carefully opened the first box, but was disappointed to find it empty. He decided to open all of them. Upon opening the second box, he found a small vial containing what looked like some kind of potion. He examined the vial intently, wondering if its contents might be poison. Suddenly, a voice echoed from somewhere, telling him to drink the potion. Hidaka felt a chill run down his spine and tried to pinpoint the source of the voice. The voice didn't stop. It urged him to drink every last drop if he truly wanted to become stronger. At first, Hidaka felt like he was just imagining things. But then, he thought about everything he had been through to get to this moment. He didn't want to live the same life as before. And since the world had given him another chance after he jumped, Hidaka decided that drinking this potion was a risk worth taking. He opened the vial and swallowed its entire contents. Soon after, everything went dark again as he faded into blackness. Meanwhile, the rest of the class had been transported to their new school, the Greyberk National Academy, owned by Ares Greyberk. Hawauchi stressed that Siki should be careful around Ares, making sure not to get too involved and end up discarded. Just then, Seiki brought up the sensitive topic of Hidaka. The others criticized him for talking about Hidaka that way, but Seiki just scoffed and called them weaklings. After a while, the students present began to argue about Hidaka and who was responsible for his death. Hawachi shut everyone down, saying that Hidaka was gone for good, and that no matter what they did or who they blamed, it wouldn't bring him back. Hidaka woke up after being unconscious for some time, his entire body aching, probably from falling on the hard floor. He realized his vision was much better and he no longer needed the wooden torch to see. He wondered if improved eyesight was all he got from drinking the potion. Hidaka looked to his left and saw that there was still a third chest he hadn't opened. Though his expectations were low after the first two, he decided to open the third one just to get it over with. Unfortunately, the third chest turned out to be a mimic, a dangerous creature with a long tongue and sharp teeth. The monster immediately lunged at Hidaka. He wasn't fast enough to dodge the attack, and it bit off a part of his left arm. If he hadn't run, the creature could have done even more damage. Hidaka escaped that room and ran into another one to treat himself. Even though he was a healer, he remembered he belonged to the weakest of all classes. He wondered how he could possibly win or even survive against such a terrifying monster. While checking his thoughts through his status screen, Hidaka saw something entirely new. A new skill he possessed. The enhanced mischievous reversal. This was a skill he gained by drinking the secret medicine of the god of vengeance. The effect of the enhanced mischievous reversal could be applied to any target or cancelled at will. If used on a status, plus would become minus, and if used on a life effect, it would turn into death upon appraisal. Hidaka heard a voice telling him to activate the god of vengeance's mischief, as well as the mischievous reversal skill. This meant that his recovery spell would be reversed into Waves of Erosion. Waves of Erosion was a magical technique that originated from the user. These waves moved outward in a sphere, spreading erosion and draining the life force of anything they touched. The sphere's area of effect could be expanded depending on the user's magical power. This meant the recovery skill had now been transformed into a more destructive power. Hidaka was amazed by his new, unique skill. He wondered if it would be enough to defeat the mimic. He returned to the room and saw the mimic transforming back into a box. Hidaka was scared at first and decided that the mimic wouldn't attack if he left it alone. But as he thought about it, he remembered how the mimic had almost mangled his hand, and he suddenly felt a desire for revenge. Hidaka activated Waves of Erosion and aimed it at the mimic. An explosion occurred instantly, killing the monster swiftly. Hidaka couldn't believe the incredible power of his new skill. The status window announced that Divine Protection had been activated and instructed him to choose a reward from the battle. The choices included a camouflage skill that allowed for shapeshifting, a precious box with infinite storage, and a recovery potion. Although the camouflage skill sounded interesting, Hidaka felt the precious box was the most necessary item for now. The status window announced that he had just defeated a level 500 mimic and had gained enough experience to level up. The person with the weakest profession had now defeated a level 500 monster. Interestingly, he received a notification that he had leveled up, then another and another. The notification sound kept going, making him wonder if it would ever stop. His magical techniques also leveled up, along with several other skills, maxing out instantly. So much for being the weakest. After a while, the notification sound stopped, allowing Hidaka Masamune to assess his new stats. They were impressive, to say the least. He wondered if this meant he was now very strong, or if this world simply had very low standards. He also remembered that his classmates likely possessed skills just as powerful, if not more so. In the end, Hidaka decided to keep moving to see what lay ahead. He walked until he found himself in front of a very large door. Hidaka was excited by the door and wanted to see what was inside, but the door wouldn't open. Fortunately, he now had the Waves of Erosion skill. With that skill, he easily broke down the door and stepped inside. Inside the large room, he saw a staff floating in midair without any support. It reminded him of the fantasy games he used to play. Feeling the staff would be a useful addition to his collection, he decided to approach it. He had only taken a few steps when the ground began to shake, almost like an earthquake. No, it wasn't an earthquake, but another creature in the room. Hidaka saw a giant, armored knight. It must be the guardian of the staff. The guardian looked aggressive, immediately swinging its longsword toward Hidaka. Fortunately, Hidaka's defense and resistance had doubled at the last minute, allowing him to dodge the attack. However, he felt the force of the blow and didn't want to imagine the damage he would have taken if it had connected. The guardian didn't attack immediately, and Hidaka noticed it was still struggling to pull its sword from the ground. This was an opportunity he couldn't miss. Hidaka immediately activated waves of erosion and aimed it at the guardian. The guardian fell back and lay motionless, making Hidaka certain of his victory. Seriously, waves of erosion was like a cheat code. Hidaka was overjoyed, but he didn't notice the guardian's giant leg approaching from behind. The guardian's kick sent Hidaka crashing into the wall in pain. If he hadn't raised his defense earlier, he would have been in serious trouble. Hidaka quickly recovered and prepared for the next attack. Fortunately, the guardian was off balance, with only its leg on the ground, giving Hidaka time to make another move. He used waves of erosion again, but this time he focused all his power into the attack. The continuous waves were too much for it to handle, and finally, the attack split the guardian in two. His victory was confirmed. This time, he received a skill from his latest victory, Mimic's Life, a skill unique to high-level mimics, which allowed him to create information displays on the status screen. Hidaka also received a high-level sword and shield. The status window confirmed his victory against the level 400 giant mimic and announced he had leveled up. His new level on the status screen read 2,120. However, Hidaka refused to get carried away, especially since his magic skills were only at level 5. He also received additional motivation from Ares and the bullies, something that would surely never fade from his mind. Hidaka Masamune finally took the floating staff. The status window informed him that he had just obtained a magic tool, Saint's Wrath, a staff containing intermediate-level holy magic of the light element. Although he didn't fully understand what that meant, Hidaka felt he might need it in the future, so he stored it in his precious chest and continued on his journey. After all, he was just getting started. At the upper training grounds of Greyberg Academy, the students were deep in their training sessions. Ichijo, however, was struggling, especially after a failed attempt to create a magic circle. The instructor in charge of the training session, Philip Battler, stepped in to offer some advice. He explained that the magic circle had exploded because it was unstable and advised Ichijo to focus more. Philip also mentioned that Ichijo's explosive magic was extremely powerful, which made controlling it a challenge. However, he encouraged him to learn how to manage his power without relying on circles and spells. Otherwise, he wouldn't stand a chance against the demons. Saiki and Ichijo, who seemed to be resting under a tree, started talking about the instructor's criticism that their magical abilities were subpar, and that without enough magical power, their spells would be meaningless. Saiki started criticizing Ichijo, finding it absurd that even though he was the only one currently able to use magic, he quickly grew tired and lost all his courage. Yet he still proudly called himself a hero. Saiki believed that being labeled a hero and actually being worthy of the title were completely different things. To him, these titles were just ornaments. Ichijo, on the other hand, believed that no matter how much they desired it, changing their status was not an easy task. In a distant labyrinth, Hidaka stumbled upon a bottle of wine and some food in a food storage. It was a lucky find, and he quickly realized it was his first time tasting wine. To his surprise, it was quite pleasant. Curiosity led him to a huge door, urging him to explore the mysteries within. As he entered, he was greeted by a peculiar figure sitting on a throne. This person began a conversation with a one-eyed flying creature named Zuri. asking about the last time an adventurer had passed this way. Zuri replied that 150 years had passed. The man couldn't help but be surprised to realize he had been sitting there for such a long time. He rose from his throne and introduced himself to Hidaka as Shahon, the Serpent King. He suggested they begin their battle, but in the middle of his speech, like a sudden flash of lightning, he appeared right in front of Hidaka, stopping him in his tracks. Hidaka didn't have time to understand what was happening, only realizing it when he felt a pain in his abdomen. Shaon expressed his disappointment, having waited 150 years to face an adventurer, wondering just how much the quality of adventurers had declined. He asked Hidaka if he was a priest, thinking that might explain why Hidaka couldn't perceive his movements. However, Zuri clarified that Hidaka was actually a healer. Shaon was astonished, wondering how a healer could have reached this place alone. Zuri tried to hint to Shaon that there was something special about Hidaka's skills. But before it could finish, Hidaka quickly gripped his staff and activated a holy light. He aimed at Zuri and destroyed it to pieces. Shaon became enraged with Hidaka for destroying his loyal companion and lunged toward him. However, Hidaka unleashed his erosion wave skill, directing it at Shaon. Fortunately, Shaon managed to dodge a fatal blow, but the skill still took its toll, breaking his sword into 2 pieces. Shaon felt even more despair as he realized both his sword and his loyal companion had been heavily damaged. Hidaka asked why he was making such a fuss over a simple sword, but before he could say more, Shaon quickly slashed at him. In a fit of rage, Shaon demanded to know why Hidaka dared to mock him after killing Zuri and breaking his sword. He warned that he wouldn't let him leave alive. Hidaka immediately began to heal himself. Annoyed that Shaon was so fast he couldn't see his attacks, Shaon wondered if the magic that killed Zuri had come from Hidaka's staff, but he also noticed that the spell Hidaka had just used showed no signs of being item-assisted. Finally, Shaon asked Hidaka who he was. Hidaka responded by declaring that he was a healer, just as Zuri, the one-eyed monster, had mentioned earlier. Shaon, who didn't believe what he was hearing, decided to slash Hidaka repeatedly until he finally revealed the truth. According to Shaon, Zuri had informed him that Hidaka was very strange, but Hidaka had chosen to silence Zuri to prevent it from revealing his secret. Shaon found it hard to accept that a healer could use attack magic, implying that Hidaka was hiding something. Despite enduring numerous slashes, Hidaka continued to insist he was a healer. Shaon grew even more furious when Hidaka refused to reveal his name, instead just repeating his profession. Hidaka began to recall being bullied as a child, and strangely, he started to think that being called a NEET was better than being labeled a low-class healer. With newfound determination, he decided to reveal to Shaon that his name was now NEET. Hidaka resolutely accepted this name and became determined to make it famous, with the goal of getting revenge on those who had once looked down on him. Shaon found the name amusing and even playfully mispronounced it, but he persisted in asking what Hidaka truly was. Hidaka was unwavering, still insisting he was a healer. Shaon, fed up with Hidaka's game, decided to take a more ruthless approach, slashing at him with all his might. After Hidaka fell to the ground, Shaon prepared to deliver a final blow to finish him off. However, in a surprising turn of events, Hidaka managed to unleash a powerful erosion wave at the last second, finally defeating Shaon. In his final words before dying, Shaon advised Hidaka to keep his true identity a secret. Hidaka was surprised, wondering what he meant by that. Shaon explained that, despite possessing extraordinary magical power with unique traits, the healer class was considered low rank. If news of Hidaka's abilities were to spread, he would become a target for others. People generally expect those in low-ranking classes to be weak, so concealing his true identity was the wiser choice. Hidaka moved closer to Shaon, asking if he could ask a question. Shaon agreed, as a reward for Hidaka having defeated him. Hidaka asked if Shaon knew someone called the God of Vengeance. Shaon was taken aback by the name and had a sudden flashback to a conversation with an old friend who once said he wanted to start using the title God of Vengeance. With a smile, Sean finally understood everything. He informed Hidaka that it had been quite a while since he'd last heard that name, mentioning it was the nickname of a cursed adventurer. Seon then advised Hidaka to journey to distant lands, assuring him that one day he would grasp the true meaning of everything. Seon asked for Hidaka's real name, surprising him by revealing that he had seen through his alias, Neat. Hidaka honestly revealed his real name, but when he asked Shaon about the reason for his strange actions earlier, he realized that Shaon had already passed away. Suddenly, the sword Shaon's serpent appeared before Hidaka, and he received a notification that he now possessed it. Hidaka wondered if a healer like him could even use such a weapon, but he ultimately decided to accept it as a reward for defeating Zuri. Hidaka also received the skill Magic Eye of the Truth, and in a surprising turn of events, he inherited the speed skill as a reward for defeating Seon. Magic Eye of the Truth was a skill that allowed him to secretly appraise another person's status without their permission or knowledge. After defeating Seon, Hidaka wandered through the labyrinth and stumbled upon an endless staircase. On his way up, he would take a sip from a bottle of liquor, get drunk, then use his Cure Abnormal status skill to sober up, repeating the cycle just to kill time as he continued to climb. Suddenly, he heard a voice from behind, and what happened next truly surprised him. When he turned to face the voice, he found himself standing in the middle of a forest, completely bewildered. He wondered what had just happened, as he was certain that just a moment ago, he was on those stairs. He began to think he might have been transported again, as the feeling was similar to when he first arrived in this strange world. But he decided to stop worrying about it and was just happy to be out of the labyrinth. He resolved to continue his adventure elsewhere. Suddenly, he heard the same female voice as before he was transported. He turned around and saw 3 people not far away. 2 of them, a boy and a girl, were arguing, while the other, a black-haired boy holding a long katana, was staring intently at Hidaka while the other 2 were still bickering. Hidaka just looked at them expressionlessly, wondering if they were even human. Then the girl asked her friends about Hidaka's identity. The black-haired boy stepped out of the bushes and said it didn't matter who Hidaka was, because he had likely been eavesdropping on them, so they needed to deal with him immediately. Hidaka panicked when he heard the threat to end his life. He tried to reason with the black-haired boy, asking him to lower his weapon so they could talk. But without listening, the black-haired boy lunged towards Hidaka, trying to strike him down with blinding speed. To the boy's surprise, in the blink of an eye, Hidaka was suddenly behind his female companion, holding a sword to her neck and telling him not to move. The other boy was terrified and shouted the girl's name, calling her Eliza. The black-haired boy turned around and asked Hidaka how he managed to get past him, but Hidaka pleaded with him not to move. Hidaka demanded that both boys put their swords down. Eliza, the girl, called the black-haired boy Jeek and begged him to lower his weapon, saying that they had already lost. Finally, Jeek agreed and stuck his sword in the ground, telling Hidaka to let Eliza go. Hidaka suspected it might be a trap, but Jeek promised he wouldn't fight anymore. Hidaka decided to trust them and handed Eliza over to the other boy, Alfred. He sheathed his sword and left without delay. Unexpectedly, Jeek begged him to wait a moment. With a hint of arrogance, Hidaka asked why, when just a few minutes ago, they were all trying to kill him. Jeek introduced himself and explained to Hidaka that he needed his help. Unexpectedly, Jeek invited Hidaka to join them. However, Hidaka flatly refused and started to walk away, saying it sounded like a troublesome situation and advised them to find help elsewhere. But as he was walking away, he suddenly realized that a barrage of fireballs was being launched at him from behind. Hidaka managed to dodge the fire attack and asked Jeek if he had lost his mind. In response, Jeek calmly stated that he was perfectly composed while summoning a powerful fire hammer spell. As Hidaka had climbed the stairs, he couldn't help but recall how he had used a cunning reversal technique on all of his spells. This was the opposite of the soul-destroying attribute. He realized that due to a lack of information on the range and scale of the skill's effect on magic, He wouldn't fully understand it until he tested it in a real battle. So, he had chosen to keep the skill in his storage. However, he now reasoned that since the fire hammer was relatively small in scale, this was the perfect opportunity for him to test the skill. When the flames were just inches away, Hidaka activated a special move, Soul Break, instantly shattering Jeek's magic circle. Jeek was surprised to see his magic circle collapse so easily and began to wonder if Hidaka was some kind of monster. Hidaka prepared to counterattack Jeek, but suddenly Eliza grabbed his hand and begged him for forgiveness and to spare Jeek. Even though Jeek was the one in the wrong, Hidaka realized that this situation was making him just like his bullies. So he decided to let it go, determined not to become someone like Siki. As he started to walk away, Jeek stopped him and asked if he wanted to become their teammate. Jeek confessed that from the very beginning, he had sensed that Hidaka was no ordinary person, which was why he had tested him, believing Hidaka could dodge his attacks. Jeek explained to Hidaka that they were looking for a strong ally, as they were part of a special group, and that's why they needed someone as strong as him. Hidaka felt his curiosity piqued and asked what was in it for him. Jeek replied frankly that they were willing to grant him anything he desired. However, Hidaka refused the offer, saying he didn't really need anything, and even if he did, they couldn't provide what he truly wanted. Eliza tried to convince Jeek not to recruit Hidaka, but Jeek stressed the urgency and the need for a strong person for their mission. In the end, Jeek made a crucial decision, giving Hidaka a ring. He explained that it was a communication device, and if Hidaka channeled his magical energy into it, he could communicate with others from a distance. Jeek pleaded with Hidaka to think carefully about the offer, then went on to explain that their group was called Dragon's Heart, and their mission was to eliminate corruption and bring peace to the world. After thinking for a moment, Hidaka agreed to take the ring. He summoned his spatial storage and placed it inside. Alfred was astonished to see this skill, and Hidaka asked if it was rare. Alfred said that this was the first time he had ever seen it in his life. Jeek informed Hidaka that they were on their way to Grey Belka, because a month ago, that country had summoned heroes, so they were going to investigate the incident. Hidaka couldn't believe his ears when he heard this, because as far as he knew, only a few days had passed since he arrived here. Jeek asked him where he was going, and Hidaka replied that he was just heading to town. Eliza then mentioned that it would take 3 days to walk to the town, and only then did she remember to ask his name. Hidaka realized that since they were heading to Grey Belka, using his real name wouldn't be safe. Instead, from now on, he decided to adopt a new alias, Nito. So, he introduced himself by his new name, Nito, while wandering in the forest. Nito encountered a pack of wolves and decided to test his skills. However, just before he could act, a voice warned him to hide. Suddenly, a girl with a sword appeared and quickly defeated the entire pack of wolves. She thought Nito was in danger and decided to save him. She checked to see if he was okay, and Nito awkwardly replied that he was fine. Nito thanked the girl for saving him, saying he thought he was a goner. Using his appraisal skill, he discovered that her name was Sierra, a Carlot, and a Knight of the White King. Sierra suddenly got closer to him, saying that he didn't seem very happy that she had helped him. Suddenly, a carriage approached them. A voice called out to Sierra, and as the carriage drew near, a man stepped out and introduced himself as William Vector, while also introducing his bodyguard, Keith. Sierra told Nito her name, and Nito did the same with a confused look on his face. She told Nito that his name sounded strange. Afterwards, the carriage continued on through the forest, now with Nito inside. William informed them that they were transporting goods to Roshausen. He explained that since he and Sierra knew each other, he had offered her a ride to Roshausen in exchange for her protection during the journey. Nito apologized for bothering them, but William dismissed it, saying you can never have enough guards on the road. He recalled how Sierra had jumped out of the carriage the moment she sensed a presence, and that such an action was normal for her, although it had surprised him a little. He also expressed how lucky he was to see one of the White King's knights in action. Sierra blushed, insisting that it was nothing special. Nito then asked who the White King's knights were. Sierra was surprised that he didn't know about them, explaining that Razhausen, the royal capital, has been ruled by a king named Arnold Razhausen for generations. She explained that the people who work under him are known as the White King's Knights. William chimed in, saying that wasn't entirely certain, since the White King's Knights rarely ever appear, and seeing one of them in a place like this was practically a miracle. Flattered, Sierra said that he was exaggerating things. Nito, however, silently agreed, thinking that he never expected to see such a beautiful silver-haired girl and believing she must be the heroine of this world. Sierra then told William that he was quite famous himself, but William humbly denied it. She went on to say that there wasn't a single person in the merchant trade who didn't know of him, and that he was widely known for dealing in rare and valuable items. Nito realized that was why William needed protection. William bowed his head in thanks and said he was unworthy of such praise. William then asked Nito what he was doing in such a remote place, and Nito replied that he just wanted to go on an adventure. William then asked Nito if he was heading to the guild. At first, Nito was confused but quickly realized that guilds existed in this world, a classic destination for someone from another world. He then lied, saying he was on his way there. Sierra offered to show him the way when they arrived. She asked Nito about his class, and Nito was surprised that she asked him so casually. He considered lying to her, as he'd always been advised to keep his identity a secret, but in the end, he decided to tell the truth. He was a healer. Hearing this, Sierra asked in surprise if he planned on joining a party, and Nito said that he intended to if he could find the right one. Sierra then offered to help him ask around at the guild. She warned that being a healer was a difficult class for an adventurer, but still assured him that he would find someone to team up with. Beginning to smile, Nito promised to do his best, energized by Sierra's optimism. Sierra then told Nito that since he couldn't use offensive magic, it would be best for him to learn how to use a weapon or two. This information took Nito by surprise, as he couldn't believe that he could use weapons even as a healer. He asked Sierra if he could use fireballs or lightning. She replied that it would be difficult for him, as healers and sorcerers have different magical natures. Nito then asked if he could do it using attribute enhancement, and Sierra explained that attribute enhancement and magical attributes are different. Attribute enhancement is a support spell that can only be applied to weapons. As she continued to explain, Nito listened in silence, finding it difficult to understand everything. Sierra then said that even so, it was rare for a healer to possess attribute enhancement magic, which was all the more reason for him to learn swordsmanship. Nito decided he would try to learn it, and Sierra cheerfully promised to teach him later. The carriage finally arrived at Tanya village, and the group decided to take a rest. As they stepped out of the carriage, they saw a crowd gathered around the entrance of a building. Curious, they asked what had happened, and the crowd parted to reveal an elderly man sitting with several others. The man asked the travelers who they were, and after a few minutes of explanation, he understood and apologized, saying the village was currently in no condition to welcome guests. The elderly man then explained that their village had been attacked by bandits, and all the women in the village had been taken away. The surrounding men angrily shouted that they had gathered to get their women back, insisting that they couldn't just sit by and let this happen. Sierra then told the men that bandits and gangs operate differently, and that most bandits are connected to slavers. She added that while they should rescue the women as soon as possible, she suggested that her group go in their place. At first, the elderly man tried to stop them, but William told him not to worry and to let them handle this. He then told Sierra to bring Heath along, saying he would be able to help. Sierra asked if anyone knew where the bandits might have gone. At first, everyone was silent, but then a young boy named Jack stepped forward, saying he had followed the bandits and found their camp after climbing a mountain, where he saw his mother and the other villagers locked in cages. He volunteered to help, saying he wanted to save his mother and the others. Later, they arrived at the camp and hid in the nearby bushes. Sierra told Jack to go back to the village and wait there, while the bandits chatted amongst themselves and the women in the cages waited in despair. Nito couldn't help but feel like he was taking part in a game event. Sierra told Jack that she and Keith would take care of the guards around the area and would signal him when everything was ready. She told them to stay put and just focus on providing support. Nito thought to himself that staying back was unavoidable. Since he was a healer, he decided to stay out of the way for now and witness the power of the White Kingdom's knights. Back in the village, the old man continued to worry about their safety. William continued to reassure everyone that they would be fine since Keith was with them. He also added that even though Sierra was young, she was still one of the White Kingdom's knights. Meanwhile, on the mountain, Sierra plunged a sword into a bandit's chest. He fell to the ground, dying instantly. Afterwards, Keith and Nito began to pile up the bodies of the other 3 bandits. Nito praised Sierra's fighting style, but she humbly replied that it was nothing special. They freed all the women from the cages, and Sierra announced that they would be returning to the village, reminding everyone to follow quietly. Sierra was thankful that most of the bandits weren't present, but Nito couldn't help but feel that everything was too easy. As they were preparing to leave, a man in a black robe, along with a few others, approached and asked where they thought they were going. Sierra readied herself, unsurprised to learn that the mission wouldn't be so easy. The man agreed with her, saying that no one would let their merchandise be taken so easily. Nito then deduced that this was actually a trap from the start. Sierra finally realized he was Oliver Joe, a former knight of Rishausen and the captain of the Ash Gang. 2 years ago, he had suddenly slaughtered all his men, burned the city to the ground, and vanished. Oliver bowed and cheerfully thanked her for the introduction. She asked why someone as capable as him would get involved in thievery, and he replied that he hated the idea of being loyal to a country or a king and despised being used by them. She said that the current king is a generous man, but he shot back, asking what would happen if the king's orders were absolute. That question made Sierra freeze in fear. Oliver continued, saying her eyes were just like those of the people he'd killed, but he wouldn't kill her because as a beautiful woman, she would fetch a good price. He sensed someone pursuing them and ordered his men to kill only the men. Sierra told Nito to get everyone and run. She used her Icewind Storm skill to take down most of Oliver's subordinates. Oliver clapped, saying he expected nothing less from a knight of the White King. Meanwhile, another subordinate charged towards Nito and the women, but Keith quickly intervened and killed him with a masterful strike. He calmly encouraged Sierra to keep her spirits up. Nito, on the other hand, was ecstatic over Keith's skill, amazed that such a thing was possible for an attack class, while Oliver sighed, annoyed that the bandits were so weak. He claimed that he was suffering from his subordinates' incompetence. Just as Sierra finished off the last bandit, she suddenly heard a cry for help. One of the women screamed for Jack, who was now being held tightly by Oliver. Jack cried out for his mother, but Oliver yelled at him to shut up. Sierra, confused, couldn't understand why Jack was with him. Oliver explained that he'd taken the opportunity to grab the boy when he was alone on his way to the village. Only a fool would leave a child alone in enemy territory, he said, questioning Sierra's competence. Are you really a knight of the White Kingdom? Jack kept crying for Sierra and his mother, but Oliver pulled his hair, screaming at him to be quiet. He pulled a knife from his back pocket and stabbed it straight toward Jack's neck. But in the blink of an eye, Nito appeared behind him, Oliver's knife now in Nito's hand. Nito plunged the blade into the bandit's neck, and moments later, Oliver fell to the ground, dead. Everyone around them was stunned by what had just happened, a palpable tension filling the air. Nito, trying to break the tense atmosphere, suggested they should head back, since the village was probably worried about them. Meanwhile, Keith just quietly took in everything that had just happened. Sierra demanded Nito explain how he was able to do that, even offering to check his status. Nito just pointed out that they should return to the village first. Sierra relented, saying he would explain it to her once they got back. As they walked back to the village, Nito complimented Keith's magic, but Keith just smiled and said it was nothing compared to what Nito had just done. Nito realized he had no allies in this argument and started thinking about Cheon's advice, that his actions were the right thing to do, since Jack would have died if he hadn't intervened. Upon returning to the village, the men enthusiastically welcomed back the women and the heroes, the air filled with joy. Nito looked around, happy at the sight. Suddenly, he noticed a cloaked girl standing by a warehouse, completely alone. Nito tried to talk to her, but the girl ignored him. The girl said she wasn't from the village and had been in the cage when they were brought here. Sierra approached and also tried to talk to her, promising to take care of her and send a request to the town council to get her back to her hometown. Still, no response. Nito spoke to her again, saying she could go back any time, but if she didn't know the way, he could take her there if she wanted. At first, Sierra told him he should be gentler, but then the girl lightly tugged on Nito's cloak. Nito told the girl she was embarrassing him, and she suddenly spoke up, saying that she didn't like him. This surprised Nito, and he asked why she hadn't said so sooner. The girl took off her cloak and introduced herself as Toatrika, but said he could call her Toa. Nito then introduced himself. At first, he tried to say his name was Nito, but for some reason, he decided to tell her his real name was Masamune. However, he quickly asked her to call him Nodo in front of other people, and she agreed. Nito asked her how she got captured, but she explained that she didn't know, and when she woke up, she was already in the forest. He asked where her home was, but she didn't know that either. Nito decided they would just have to try and find Toa's hometown. Meanwhile, back at the carriage, William asked Keith about the outcome of the encounter and his impression of Sierra. Keith said that, just as he'd mentioned, her swordsmanship was amazing, and her killing intent was also excellent. William then said that Nito would have a hard time and that a difficult road lay ahead of him. However, Keith disagreed, saying that it wouldn't be a problem and that Nito was truly a monster. William felt both worried and curious hearing Keith speak about Nito that way. The party finally left Tanya village early in the morning and continued their journey to Rizos. On the way, Sierra reminded Nito that he still hadn't explained how he was able to defeat Oliver, despite being a healer. She said she wouldn't rest until he gave her a satisfactory answer. She even began to doubt whether he was really a healer at all. Nito then showed Sierra his status, explaining that he had used the Godspeed skill to move quickly and retrieve the knife. Satisfied with the explanation, Sierra apologized for doubting him, but Nito replied that it was fine as long as she understood. He silently gave thanks for having learned the mimic's life skill. William then announced that they were close to Rizos. When they got out of the carriage, they saw a city surrounded by a huge wall that stretched as far as the eye could see. Nito gazed at the city in awe. Once they were inside, William said his goodbyes, hoping to see them again sometime. Nito, Sierra, and Toa thanked him for the ride and headed for the guild. When they arrived, Sierra led him to a crystal orb, which was used to check one's status for registration. As he placed his hand on the orb, Nito used his mimic's life skill again and created a fake status for himself. Sierra then asked him what he planned to do now that he was registered. Nito turned to Toa and asked if she wanted to go to the city hall to look for clues about her hometown. Toa looked away, saying she could do it later. Nito noticed that Toa didn't seem very eager to find her home. He then asked if she wanted to register as an adventurer, and she immediately agreed. Suddenly, a burly man placed a hand on Nito's shoulder, saying he was jealous that Nito had two beautiful girls with him. He asked if Nito would mind sharing them with his friends. With an awkward smile, Nito apologized to the man, saying they were both his friends. The man's expression immediately turned serious, telling Nito he was ordering him to leave them be. He stressed that being an adventurer would be too hard for him since he was a healer, and that it would be best for him to just go home. Toa told the man he was being rude. He turned to her and said she should leave Nito and join him and his friends, promising it would be fun. Suddenly, some knights burst into the guild looking for Sierra. One of them, Annette, knelt before Sierra, overjoyed that she had returned to the capital safely. Looking over at Nito and Toa, she asked who they were and wondered if she was interrupting something. Sierra introduced Nito and Toa to Annette, who thanked them for taking care of Sierra and invited them to come to the castle. Frustrated, the man finally spoke up, grabbing Sierra's cloak and yelling that she shouldn't ignore him while he was talking. Annette immediately grabbed him and pinned him to the ground, calling him a brute and asking if he had any idea who he was touching. Nito was surprised to see that the man was an adventurer, especially since he seemed so weak after being taken down. Sierra said goodbye to Naito and asked Toa if she still didn't want to go to the city hall. Toa confirmed she didn't, and hearing that, Sierra decided not to press the issue and said they could come to the Ecarlat house if any problems came up. After Sierra left, Nito wondered what to do now. He realized he didn't have any money. A woman suddenly approached them, saying they had strange outfits. She invited them into her shop and offered to trade some of their old clothes for new ones. She gave Nito a new set of clothes, and when she learned that he was a healer, she also gave him a pouch for carrying herbs. She explained that healers can only use weak healing magic, so they need as many healing items as they can get. After that, she asked Toa about her class, and Toa replied that she was a paladin. Nito was confused, so the woman explained that paladins are also known as magic knights, or the only class capable of using magic in their swordsmanship. Upon checking Toa's status, they discovered that she was a demon. Once again, Nito was confused, and the woman explained that demons are a race said to live on the other side of the Great Forest, and are always born with high magical power. She then asked the two about their relationship, and Nito shyly told her that it was a strange combination. Afterward, the two changed into new clothes, and the woman also gave Toa a broadsword, and even gave them a small bag of money. She told Nito that although the people in Rajazin accept demons, there are still some who discriminate against them. She also added that because demons have high magical power, they easily attract the attention of kidnappers, so she asked Nito to protect Toa. Nito promised he would as they left. The woman introduced herself as Sharon and told them to come back whenever they needed anything else. Later, as they were having a drink outside, Nito asked if she could see his true status with her divine demonic eye skill, and she confirmed it. He went on to ask what she thought when she saw it, and she replied that other than finding it unusual, she didn't think much else of it. Naito then asked why she was captured by the bandits, even though she was stronger than them. She answered that she was scared. He asked where she was before entering the forest, and she revealed that she was in a castle, which shocked Nito. He started to theorize that she might be a princess from a royal family, assuming demons had a social hierarchy. Confused, he asked her what she did at the castle, and she replied that she didn't do anything special, because in the morning, she had magic and sword training, and in the evening, she would wait for her parents or her older sister to come home. While waiting, she would sometimes play in the treasure room or chat with the pixies in the garden. Nito suddenly realized that since she wasn't allowed outside since she was little, she'd never been outside the castle walls. She was just like him, experiencing the world for the first time. Nito and Toa went into the forest to defeat goblins and collect their fangs to pay for their lodging. Curious, Nito wondered if goblins turned into corpses when they died, as he believed mimics disappeared after death. Toa clarified that only mimics and dungeons disappear, while goblins do not. She added that goblins are monsters, not mimics. Nito, confused, asked about their differences. Toa explained that mimics are intelligent and can speak human language, while monsters are completely different. Nito quickly realized that Zuri wasn't a monster, as he had thought, but was actually a mimic. Afterward, Nito and Toa returned to the guild to sell the goblin fangs. Noticing Toa yawn, Nito thought she must be tired after a day's work, so he suggested finding a fun activity. The receptionist gave them a map and suggested a free room at an inn for the night. Suddenly, an arrogant man approached from behind, curious about Toa's name. Nito stepped forward, warning the man that Toa was with him. The man, not recognizing Nito, asked if he was an adventurer, and Nito confirmed it. The man then told Nito it was no surprise he didn't recognize him, but then he started belittling Nito for taking on a goblin-slaying quest. Nito felt hurt, but tried to hide it by politely trying to end the conversation. However, as they turned to leave, the man mocked that low-rank quests don't pay well. Nito once again remained polite, reassuring the man that they didn't need to worry about their finances. However, the man rudely cut him off, telling Nito to shut up because he was talking to the girl beside him, not to him. The man tried to impress To by suggesting that if she joined him, he could conquer challenging quests like hunting boar wolves, giant snakes, and even grizzleheads. Finally, he admitted to witnessing Nito's argument with someone else earlier and knew that Nito was a healer. The arrogant man taunted Nito, implying his journey might be cut short and that he'd probably end up in a cheap inn that night. He uncomfortably patted To on the shoulder and implied that if she went with him, he could offer her much more satisfaction than Nito ever could. Nito realized the man had ulterior motives and decided it wasn't worth arguing with him. Instead, he suggested to Toa that they should leave, but Toa seemed unwilling to back down. Nito tried to get her attention, but she ignored him and used a powerful lightning spell to take the man down, surprising everyone in the guild. Nito took her hand and they quickly left the guild. As they walked, To was still angry and started to walk faster than Nito. He repeatedly asked her to slow down a bit. At first, she ignored him, but eventually, she stopped and emotionally asked him why he didn't say anything to the man, especially when he was strong enough to defend himself. Nito sighed and explained to her that his strength made him believe the man wasn't worth his attention, so he decided to ignore him to avoid causing a scene. Nito noticed Toa starting to clench her fists in frustration and anger. He realized that he also felt angry at the man, but thought it was best not to express it directly. However, he was shocked to see Toa's tears, since they had only just met and didn't even know each other that well. Nito apologized to Toa and admitted that he had considered physically confronting the man. He also thanked her for being angry on his behalf and promised to stand up for himself next time. However, he understood that in this world, healers aren't expected to be strong, so he would try to handle things without causing a big commotion. Toa stopped crying and told him she understood. She affectionately reassured him that she was willing to be angry for him. Nito and Toa enjoyed a delicious meal they had earned from a stonewall monster. Nito was quite sure that Toa must have enjoyed this dish many times before, but to his surprise, she confessed that she never had. Nito found it puzzling, thinking their meal was fit for royalty, and he wondered how To had never experienced such delicious meat. In response, To shared that her food choices had always revolved around meals prepared just for her. She needed food to enhance her magical abilities, so her previous culinary experiences were very different. Nito gradually realized that the more time he spent with Toa, the more interesting she became. He decided it would be a good idea for them to take on a reconnaissance mission in the Monsterlands, as it was likely Toa's homeland. Toa took another spoonful and commented that this meal would surely boost her power more than any before. She was so impressed by the prospect of the rewards from this delicious meal that she was willing to repeat the experience many times. Nito was glad to see the meal had cheered To up. He suggested that they take on another quest the next day to seek an even bigger reward. To readily agreed to the proposal. After their meal, Nito and Toa booked a room at a popular inn, with comfortable beds and a pleasant bath. They were lucky to get into such a busy inn. Nito suggested that he would sleep on the floor so To could have the bed, but Toa proposed a better idea. They could lie on either side of the bed, as it was big enough for both of them, and he would catch a cold if he slept on the floor. Nito expressed that he wasn't a quiet sleeper, often tossing and turning all night, but To decided not to mind and called him by his real name, Masamune. This caught Nito off guard, leaving him flustered. Toa had already laid down on the bed and asked Nito if he wasn't going to join her. Not wanting to further address the statement that had shocked him, Nito decided to climb into bed beside her, while Toa seemed to be fast asleep. Nito felt restless. To called out to him, asking if he was asleep yet. He admitted he was far from it. Toa revealed that she had always been alone in the castle. Her parents often returned late at night, and her sister was always busy. Her only friends were the pixies, and she often felt lonely. At this moment, with Nito by her side, Toa no longer felt alone. She warmly wished Nito good night, pulling closer to snuggle up to him. That simple yet affectionate gesture made Nito relax, and he finally drifted into a peaceful sleep. The next day, they had a visitor knocking at their door. Nito, still sleepy, opened it and said it was too early for visitors. The visitor was none other than Sierra, who said it was already noon and that she had come to teach Nito swordsmanship. The conversation woke To up, who asked what all the noise was about. Sierra was surprised to see To there, dressed provocatively, and was immediately drawn into a fiery argument between the two girls. Sierra apologized for her actions during lunch, saying she was sorry for jumping to conclusions and attacking Nito, which was incomprehensible for her as a white knight. Nito quickly brushed it off. Sierra mentioned hearing Toa call Nito Masamune, and she was able to piece together that Nito was an alias. Nito begged her to keep this a secret, while making a mental note that he needed to be more careful about To using that name, as he didn't want it to become public knowledge. Sierra asked if Masamune was his name from the country of Gikoku. Gikoku is a nation across the sea from the continent of Venom, and its residents often use names similar to Nito's. Nito made a mental note that he needed to gather more information about this country. Sierra again brought up the possibility of teaching Nito swordsmanship, and Nito expressed his interest. Nito planned to accept a quest from the guild today, as he needed money. Sierra asked if she could come along, promising that with her help, they would be able to take on high-reward quests. The deal for high-reward quests was settled. They arrived at the guild and were informed that there were ranks for adventurers based on their achievements. The lowest rank was F and the highest was SSS. Toei and Nito currently qualified for E-rank quests, but Sierra's presence gave them an advantage, bumping them up to D-rank quests or even higher. Nito asked Sierra if she was also an adventurer, and she replied that before she swore her service to the country, she'd also taken on requests from the guild. This was mandatory for knights serving the nation, so technically, all knights were adventurers. Nito still seemed worried, asking if it was all right for Sierra to show up at the guild 2 days in a row, as it was generally believed that white knights shouldn't make public appearances. She brushed it off, saying she knew how to blend in and tone it down. Besides, she was entering the guild as a knight, not an adventurer. They discussed what kind of request to take, considering that everything on the list was feasible for Nito. He scanned the notices and pointed to one with a monster he could identify. Sierra explained that this monster was called a Kalane, a giant two-horned beast that lived in the forest. Nito suggested they take on the Kalane challenge. After completing the necessary procedures with the receptionist, Sierra asked if they could visit the shop for a bit. The group unanimously agreed. They arrived at Sharon's shop, and Sharon happened to know Sierra, asking her if she was on her day off. Sierra said yes, and announced that they had a mission to slay a Kalane, so they were thinking of stocking up on Catherine medicine. Nito, ever curious, asked what that was, and Sharon explained that it was a hearing protection drug. As it turned out, a Kalane's cry could paralyze its victim's body, so having this medicine was crucial. Sharon remembered Nito as the healer who had visited her shop before. Upon closer inspection, she also revealed that Toa was a paladin. Sierra was surprised to hear this and expressed her disbelief, repeatedly mentioning it even as they approached the grill forest. Apparently, only one person in the entire country possessed the paladin class, and it was an extremely rare class, even among the Knights of the White Kingdom. Anyone would be surprised to learn that To was a paladin. Nito argued that if this information was so sensitive, it would be best for Sierra to keep that secret to herself. Inwardly, he felt he was in trouble. What if Sierra accidentally let his real name slip to someone? She had just barely managed to keep the secret about the paladin. As they emerged from the forest, a group of people caught Sierra's attention, prompting her to ask about their experience. They began to recount their adventure in the woods, sharing that things were going smoothly at first as they were searching for orcs. However, their journey took a disturbing turn when they witnessed orcs, goblins, and wolves fleeing in a state of panic. Despite some hesitation, they decided to stay and witness the appearance of a Kolain. What struck them as odd was that this Kolain looked rather unusual. One member of the group confidently stated that he was familiar with the appearance of a typical Kalain, but this one was different, leaving them puzzled. Sierra asked if the Kalain they saw was covered in particles of light, and they agreed that it was. Just then, they heard a terrifying sound that sent birds scattering into the air. A huge Kalain stepped out, and the group that had just left the forest admitted that the Kalain must have followed their trail. Sierra confidently switched into hero mode, assuring everyone that she and her team would handle the situation. Meanwhile, Nito was briefly captivated by the giant beast, prompting Sierra to gently inform him that he was looking at a fearsome creature, known as a Kalain. Similar to adventurers, monsters are also ranked based on the difficulty they pose. Defeating a Kalain is considered a formidable A-rank challenge, even though the Kalain itself is a B-rank creature. However, in practice, they are often treated as A-rank creatures due to their ferocious nature and bizarre cries. In other words, a request to deal with a Kalain was a dangerous mission. After the quick lecture, Sierra asked if Nito and Toa were okay, and they both said yes. For Sierra, the monster's voice affected the flow of her mana. She recalled seeing Nito in action and wondered if, should things go wrong, she could rely on him. Nito declared that he could handle it. He checked the monster's status bar and saw that it was level 32, which he decided wasn't too difficult to handle. The strategy was for Toa to support Sierra as well. Toa took the lead and performed her Ice Flash skill with her ice sword. She wondered if it was immune to weapons, but there was only one way to find out. She got close enough to strike, but quickly realized there was some kind of barrier. Toa noticed right away that magic had no effect on the monster. It turned out the Kalain could manipulate magic particles with its horns. Nito thought that perhaps they needed to destroy those horns. But before they could do anything, the Kalain unleashed a beam of light. But Sierra quickly used her magic to create a shield, which was just enough to offer protection. She created 2 magic circles at the same time, but the creature used a thunderous roar to destroy them. Nito thought deeply and decided they probably needed to change tactics. Instead of using brute force, they should analyze things more carefully. If the creature controls magic particles, then its attacks must be magical in nature. Its invulnerability must have a weak point somewhere. Nito finally came up with a solid plan. When the monster fired its beam of light, he noticed a part of the light within the beam vanished almost instantly. The goal was to aim for that gap. Toa, worried, spoke about the possibility of Nito getting hit. She offered to be a decoy, but Nito told her he'd finish things quickly. He activated the skill Soul Break. As the monster fired its beam of light, Nito was able to break through the monster's barrier and destroy its horns. Now the Kalain can no longer block our attacks. He asked them for more time, as there was something else he wanted to try. Sierra was too surprised to say much, while Toa begged that whatever happened, and everything that had happened so far, must be kept a secret within the castle. A messenger reported the sighting of a Kalain surrounded by magic particles in the Grill Forest. The informants were 4 adventurers, and they later reported to the messenger that they had been injured and were now being treated at the hospital. According to them, some adventurers had stayed behind to confront the monster. One of the adventurers was a silver-haired woman wielding a rapier. The messenger was told to report what he had just said to Hilda. The messenger arrived to deliver the report to none other than the respected leader of the White King Knights, Reinhard Rickman, who was certainly no stranger to the identity of the silver-haired woman, Sierra. However, the news left him in disbelief. Learning that Sierra was currently in a battle against a giant Kalain 2 days ago, when everyone in Tanya village had gone to sleep, Nito checked Oliver's status. Oliver was a fire magic user, possessing elemental magic that Nito wasn't sure he could use. Just then, a notification appeared, looking like a quest notification. The message contained information about Oliver's beloved wife, Anna, who had dedicated her life to becoming a knight and had even been promoted to a leadership role. all out of her love for him. However, when he returned from a grueling battle one fateful day, he received the heartbreaking news that Anna had turned to a life of thievery and tragically died while attempting a heist. This revelation plunged Oliver into deep despair. To worsen his pain, his comrades added salt to the wound by mocking his tragic fate. The letter contained further disturbing information about the king's assassination, which only piqued Nito's curiosity. Nito couldn't help but wonder why Oliver would accept such a grave mission. There was a lot the message didn't explain, but when he finished reading, he received the magic skill, Hellfire. This skill was the result of a flame born from Oliver's hatred, which would gradually incinerate its target. Nito's anxiety soared. He had no idea how to start learning this new magic skill and wondered if it was as unstable as elemental magic. Another thing was that he didn't recognize the spell associated with this skill. He slumped to the ground, dejected, and decided he hated being a healer. Then he had an idea to use the skill in reverse. The opposite of fire is water, which seemed worth a try. He proceeded to activate Mischievous Reversal through God of Revenge's Mischief. The Hellfire magic was instantly reversed into Goddess's bloody tears. He began to feel a sensation he couldn't explain, a dark energy surrounding him, giving him sharp claws and blood-red eyes, allowing him to see into another dimension. Nito watched the Kalain beast slowly disintegrate until only a pile of mush and a pool of blood remained. Toa asked him if it was over, and he announced that the strange feeling he'd felt earlier was gone. They heard a rustling in the bushes and knew someone was coming, so they had to get out of there before they were spotted. Nito didn't want to be discovered or become the center of attention as the one who killed the beast. So he urged Sierra to finish things up while he and Toa found a place to hide. Everything that had happened so far had to be kept secret, so Nito informed Sierra that he was trusting her to handle the situation discreetly. They all planned to meet again in the capital. Toa promised to inform the innkeeper of their whereabouts. Sierra stood alone, wondering who Masamune really was. Riders on horseback raced through the forest, sent to search for the adventurers fighting the Kalain. Part of the group were the White Knights, Raid Black and Hilda Ikerlot. Raid eagerly awaited the battle with the beast, planning to slash it with his scythe. When they arrived at the location, they found nothing. No Kalain, no adventurers. Then they looked closer and saw a formless black mass. They decided it must be the remains of the Kalain. Raid didn't think anyone would believe this, but it was their only clue for now. They found Sierra and asked her many questions, but she wasn't very cooperative. When asked about the two other adventurers accompanying her, she replied that they were no longer here. The knights couldn't believe that Sierra could take down a Kalain with her strength alone. Raid concluded that the other adventurers had been eaten by the Kalain. This still didn't explain how Sierra defeated the monster on her own, but for now, it was a plausible reason. They decided to contact the knight's office and gather whatever items they could find in the area. Reinhardt reported to King Razhausen that Sierra had eliminated the monster, but her condition was still unstable, so they would need to wait for the results to confirm. The king was pleased with the report and allowed Reinhardt to continue his investigation. Outside the palace chamber, the White King's knight, Daniel King, was waiting for Reinhardt. He tried to pry information out of Reinhardt, asking questions to which Reinhardt only replied that they were still investigating. Daniel pressed for any information, and Reinhardt had to make him understand that he was also completely in the dark about the situation. The Kalain's remains are currently with the autopsy team, so they'll have to wait for the results. But if Daniel felt up to it, he could go ask Sierra directly what happened. Daniel began to suspect that something fishy might have happened. Reinhardt revealed that Sierra had indeed been involved in the battle, along with two other adventurers who were now missing. When the knights arrived on the scene, the Kalain's body was in such bad shape, it was hard to confirm if it was really a Kalain. Moreover, there was an extremely large amount of blood present, which only added to the mystery. Daniel deduced that the missing adventurers were the missing piece of the puzzle. Sierra knew what happened, but she had no intention of making a statement. Daniel asked how far they had investigated Sierra, and Reinhardt said he wouldn't press her for what she wasn't willing to say. The important thing was, if those two adventurers had defeated the Kalain, then they were as strong as the White Knights, if not stronger. Reinhardt added that Daniel couldn't possibly see that happening, that someone could be stronger than their own leader. Reinhardt shrugged, unable to be certain, but Sierra had better hope the missing adventurers weren't a danger or a threat to the country, because if they were, she would face the consequences for keeping quiet about them. At this point, only one thing needed to be cleared up. Were they friend or foe? Nito shouldn't have been able to control elemental magic, and he decided to seal that skill from now on. The fact that he could break the Kalain's horn with his bare hands was terrifying enough, but it was one step at a time. Toa told him that if he didn't want to use his power, she would do her best to protect him. Nito worked up the courage to ask Toa what gave her such strong faith in him from the moment they met. Before she could answer, Sierra appeared, and Nito decided to save that conversation for another time. He then apologized to Sierra for making her come all this way, and she apologized for interrupting their talk. Sierra told Nito that he had to keep a low profile for the time being. She updated them that the Kalain had been taken for an autopsy and that she had kept quiet about Nito and Toa, but she wasn't sure how long she could stall. Nito was a little disappointed that they had worked so hard for no reward. However, Sierra insisted it was best they didn't draw any attention to themselves, which meant they would have to give up the reward. While they were talking, Raid showed up. It turned out he had been following Sierra and wanted to find out who had taken down the monster. Before Nito had a chance to say anything, Raid revealed that when the White Knights were sent to face the Kalain, its horn had been broken off and was lying in a pool of blood. Normally, to kill a Kalain, you have to use physical attacks since the monster is immune to magic. However, Raid noticed that the injuries on the monster were caused by magic. He also recalled the monster's broken horns, which were normally too hard to be snapped. Raid concluded that whoever defeated this monster was not to be taken lightly. That's why Raid had been following Sierra from the start, and her trail led him to Nito and Toa. Sierra tried to reason with Raid, saying Nito and Toa weren't enemies, but the warrior was too agitated to listen. Just then, he unleashed his power and prepared to attack them. Meanwhile, Reinhardt, who was still talking with Daniel King, sensed that Raid had just released his magical power. He decided to go check out what was happening for himself. Raid charged at his opponents with a sword, but Toa managed to block the attack at the last second. When he asked her, Toa introduced herself as Toatrika and admitted to killing the Kalain. Raid was a little surprised, as he thought Nito was the one who killed the monster. However, he couldn't sense any magical power from Nito, so he concluded the girl was telling the truth. Now that he knew who the monster killer was, or at least thought he did, Raid attacked Toa aggressively. Nito called out her name, but Toa told him to stay back, as she met every one of Raid's attacks with an excellent defense. Raid was surprised that Toa was strong enough to fight him and still maintain her focus. He was impressed. Raid decided to end the fight quickly by activating his fire armor skill. His use of this skill caught Toa by surprise, as she hadn't expected him to be a magic user. Raid now had the upper hand in the battle with Toa, unleashing powerful blows and throwing Toa from side to side. The White Knight challenged Toa to show her true power, saying her current strength wouldn't be enough to save her from him. Toa insisted that she was already showing her full strength, which disappointed Raid. He decided to end the match with his next blow. Luckily for Toa, Reinhardt intervened just in time, effectively stopping Raid's skill from harming her. Raid, frustrated, questioned Reinhardt's actions, but Reinhardt turned the question back on him, saying this wasn't his fight. Their exchange of words gave Nito enough time to heal Toa. Nito also asked why she didn't use her magical powers, and she replied that her magic would destroy everything around her. Apparently, she was hiding some power after all. Raid told Reinhardt that Toa was a monster slayer, but Reinhardt's reaction was unusual, almost unconcerned. Reinhardt suggested the monster slayer was just fulfilling a request. Raid insisted she had something to hide, which was why she was running away. Just then, Raid noticed Nito and asked if he was a priest, having seen him heal Toa. When he learned Nito was just a healer, he scoffed at the rank, assuming that was probably why he couldn't sense any magic from Nito. These words displeased Reinhardt, as he sensed something very different coming from Nito. Raid, fed up with the conversation, drew his sword and went into a battle stance again, focusing his attack on Toa. He claimed she was a danger and that he was saving the entire country by eliminating her. The pleas from Reinhardt and the others fell on deaf ears, as the White Knight's mind was made up. With his sword, he lunged towards Toa. The result was a cloud of dust, and when it cleared, Raid was lying unconscious on the ground. Toa was the only one left in the area, as Nito had moved the rest of their friends to a safe distance in the instant Raid attacked. Now, without a doubt, Reinhardt realized that Nito was the one who had defeated the Kalain. Sierra rushed in, begging Reinhardt not to do anything and promising that Nito Masamune was not an enemy. Reinhardt realized he had unconsciously drawn his sword, so he sheathed it and apologized for Raid's actions. He clarified that from the very beginning, he had sensed something different from Nito. Usually, when someone's magical power is overwhelmingly superior, it becomes difficult for others to sense it. This was likely why Raid couldn't sense anything from Nito. Nito explained why he hadn't shown himself sooner, saying he didn't want to stand out. Reinhardt completely understood and promised to take full responsibility in his report. He also promised to state that he and Toa were merely assisting Sierra in slaying the monster. He promised to give them the reward and said his farewells. Carrying Raid on his back, Reinhardt hoped to meet Nito again someday. From Nito's perspective, he had simply given Raid a light punch, with no intention of revealing his identity with that move. Back at the palace, Daniel King brought Reinhardt some more interesting news about the Kalain. From what the autopsy revealed, the monster was no ordinary Kalain. Given the structure of its internal organs, they could see that it was already dead before it even faced the adventurers. This could only mean that someone was manipulating the sacred beast from behind the scenes. Daniel, King, and Reinhardt agreed that this probably wouldn't be the last time. Hearing this, they knew they had to prepare for the unforeseen dangers approaching their country. After the events of the past few days, Sierra invited Nito and Toa to her family home, the residence of the Ecarlot family. Nito teased Sierra about being a lady from a noble family, but she replied that she just wanted to be known as a knight. Sierra's parents, Braun and Maria, gave Nito and Toa a warm welcome. They revealed that Sierra had told them so much about Nito, one might even say she talked a little too much. Just then, Sierra's beautiful older sister, Hilda, appeared to join them for dinner. She introduced herself, and Nito looked stunned. Hilda had also heard tales of Nito's bravery, including the recent incident with the Kalain. Thinking about this, Nito realized that both Sierra and Hilda were members of the White Knights. This thought made him wonder if Hilda knew his secret, either as a member of the White Knights or of the Ecarlot family. Nito praised the family for having 2 daughters in the ranks of the king's White Knights. Hilda replied humbly, saying a position had just opened up that they could fill. According to her, she and Sierra had studied swordsmanship since they were children and became knights of the kingdom. Eventually, their skills were recognized, and they became White Knights. However, she stressed that their talent was nothing compared to Reinhardt, who was chosen as a White Knight at only 12 years old, a true prodigy. However, Hilda also noted that Reinhardt's talent might not be on par with Nito's, making Nito's heart race as he wondered just how much she knew. Sierra jumped in at this point, warning Nito to be careful of her sister, calling her a predatory snake with a woman's charm. Hilda playfully teased Sierra, asking if Nito was her boyfriend. She even went a step further, asking Nito what he had done to Sierra. As Sierra's cheeks flushed red, Nito found himself enjoying the interaction between the 2 White Knight sisters. Just then, Toa joined the conversation, telling Sierra to leave Nito alone. Oh, it looks like Sierra has a rival, and it's not her sister. Toa was holding a bottle, and it was hard to hide the fact that she was drunk. In the end, Nito took Toa back to her room. He also teased Sierra about her sister's attitude. Sierra wondered why Toa seemed to be closer to Nito than she was, even though they had both met Toa at the same time. Nito admitted he was curious too and decided he would ask next time. Sierra led Nito to another room before saying goodbye. She offered to teach him a few things about swordsmanship the next day if he was interested. Nito's original plan was to go to the guild to earn some money the next day. But he agreed to her offer, which made Sierra ecstatic. He was so lost in thought about Hilda's expression that he didn't notice her sneaking up behind him. Hilda's attire was a bit revealing, but she insisted she was just passing by. She also asked if Nito had really defeated Raid, and Nito confirmed he did it to save Toa. She deduced that he and To had feelings for each other, but Nito got flustered and denied it. Hilda pleaded with Nito to look after her little sister, saying this was the first time Sierra had ever shown interest in a man. She also asked Nito to take Sierra with him when he leaves the country, whether she likes it or not, because she felt it was for her own good. Hilda said that her sister deserved to know more about the world than just swinging a sword, which is all she's done her whole life. Nito woke up the next morning and found Hilda lying in his bed. He confronted her, and she said that there was no one in her bed. She asked him if he'd done something wrong, and Nito couldn't give a straight answer. Just then, Sierra walked into the room, and her expression changed. It was a difficult situation to explain, but Nito tried to convince Sierra that it wasn't what it looked like. That afternoon, they began their sword training. Although he didn't expect to learn it in just one day, the training was harder than Nito had imagined. Sierra revealed that she started learning swordsmanship when she was only 3 years old. Hilda also started around that age. It all happened after Hilda got lost in the forest and was attacked by a Leo wolf. Luckily, their father came to the rescue. He taught his daughters how to use a sword and magic. Nito found it hard to believe that their gentle father was strong enough to defeat an S-rank Leo wolf. According to the ranking system, a Leo wolf was said to be even stronger than the new Kalain. Knights and adventurers from all over the kingdom often had to work together to barely defeat one. Nito secretly wished he could face the monster one day. He asked about anyone currently in the kingdom who had fought an S-rank monster, and they pointed him to Reinhardt, saying he was the only one who would know. In the guild, there are S-rank quests that require defeating S-rank monsters. These monsters are very rare in the currently peaceful kingdom of Verzazon. Sometimes you might get an S-rank quest to defeat an A-rank monster, because the same type of monster could be B-rank, S-rank, or higher depending on its level. Nito asked how a level 500 mimic would be ranked, and they replied that its rank status would be unranked or infinite class, if it even existed, since the guild's ranking system doesn't go beyond SSS rank monsters. Nito asked if she thought such a monster existed, and Sierra replied that even if it did, anyone who encountered it would surely be long dead, which is probably why they remain unidentified. Nito recalled the dungeon where he had met the mimic and wondered why he hadn't asked Cheyenne more about that place. Nito woke up in a strange place, even though he remembered falling asleep at Sierra's house that day. He wondered if he was dead. Then he looked back and saw Cheyenne standing behind him. He drew his weapon, but the swordsman calmed him down, saying he hadn't come to fight. He invited Nito to take a walk with him. They walked for a while until they met another person, who said he had been waiting for Nito because he was the one who had invited him. Nito didn't recognize the young man, and he sensed this. So the young man decided to transform into a form Nito would know better. When Nito saw the new form and heard the new voice, he recognized it from the dungeon, the one who told him to drink the potion for more power. Cheyenne introduced the being as his comrade, but the being stopped him from revealing its name. Nito was disappointed he couldn't learn the being's name, but in his heart, he had a feeling it was the God of Vengeance. When he said it out loud, he watched Cheyenne's reaction and concluded he was right. The God of Vengeance said that while this place was unfamiliar to Nito, it was a prison for him and Cheyenne. The god also revealed that he had summoned Nito's soul using the effects of the elixir Nito had drunk back then. He assured Nito that his real body was currently asleep back at Sierra's house. When asked, the god revealed that the elixir was actually his blood. and it grants anyone who drinks it a unique random skill. The skill granted is an unknown infinite skill. Though some skills might be unusable, the god also revealed that he didn't summon Nito to drink the elixir, and the vial was just placed there as an experiment. Nito realized he would have been dead if not for his good fortune. One of the reasons they summoned him was for Shaon to pass on his sword techniques to Nito. At first, Nito thought this would involve training with them, like with Sierra and Hilda, but Shaon assured him it would only take a moment. Nito asked if this was the main reason he was summoned, but they held back the answer. He asked a few more questions, but the vengeful god chose to remain silent. Still, he was sure he'd get his answers one day. Oh great, another mystery that needs to be solved. Nito knew this act would be just as painful as drinking an elixir. The answer had finally come. Nito felt he had come a long way since then, so he concluded the pain wouldn't be unbearable. From the moment Shaon placed his hand on Nito's forehead until he pulled it away, the young healer felt an unimaginable pain. However, he also saw the techniques being transferred before his very eyes. He received visions of memories of various sword techniques, and also saw a technique that was still unnamed. Shaon introduced it as his special technique, saying that it was a technique that had no weaknesses. The vengeful god instructed Nito to go to an event at the bay to find a woman named Madame Fran. He had to tell her the exact phrase, "I will wait for you on that hill." If she asked a question, he had to reply, "It's in the third drawer," to make her understand. Nito could barely keep track of everything that was happening, but he tried to commit the words to memory. The vengeful god also advised Nito to go to his school and learn magic, even though he was just a healer. His knowledge of his profession would increase through study. According to the vengeful god, magic is limitless, a statement Nito was very happy to hear. Shaon also instructed Nito to give his sword to the demon girl, as it was a special sword not suitable for him. Nito was surprised they knew so much about him. It felt like they were always watching him or something. Before Nito could ask any more, his vision began to blur, and the voices of the others seemed to grow more distant. They revealed that there was a time limit for the summoning, and that time was up. It was likely this would be the last time they would speak to each other. Just before Nito faded away completely, he heard the vengeful god say, "Find us in the old quarter of the capital. There's a suspicious meeting involving Madame Fran." Borfrena, along with two others, Guido Sedor and Yun Yi, were talking with Madame Fran about creating monsters. Guido informed Madame Fran that her most recent spirit beast creation was a failure and was easily stopped, causing no damage to the White Knights. He stated that an unknown adventurer had intervened, shedding blood before the White Knights arrived. However, thanks to Yun Yi, he had recovered the beast's corpse for dissection. Now, Guido wanted Madame Fran to revive that beast. Madame Fran, who had anticipated this request, gave them a large container that she said was filled with monsters of rank B and above. According to her, she had borrowed some S-rank monsters and added to them using resources from the laboratory when she left the Empire. Guido revealed a plan to attack within a week and asked Madame Fran to create as many new spirit beasts as possible in that time. These new spirit beasts, according to Guido, were a safeguard in case the adventurer showed up again. Nito was eating with Toa and Sierra, but he couldn't focus on the conversation. His mind kept drifting back to the vengeful god's final words. Sierra noticed his pale face and asked if he was okay. She also pointed out that he didn't participate in training that day. When asked if he'd lost interest, Nito denied it, saying he was just interested in exploring the town for the day. In his mind, he recalled watching the training session in slow motion, and to avoid their questions, he had skipped practice. Once they noticed his style had changed, Nito would need a reason to avoid future training sessions as well. Just then, a man barged in roughly with a little beast girl. From the way he treated her, they realized he was a slave trader. Sierra told them to handle the situation. The slave trader went inside the building and threw the beast girl into a cage, entrusting his men to watch her while he was away. The terrified girl silently called out her sister's name for help. A moment later, more men entered the room and looked at their new slave. The men suggested that they should mess with the poor girl a little since their boss wasn't around. The first man picked the terrified girl up and licked his lips, while another stood watch for the boss. Fortunately, before they could lay a hand on her, Nito intervened. He easily defeated the men and knocked them out. The scared girl ran back to the cage and Nito spoke to her, promising he wasn't like the ones who wanted to hurt her. He led her out of there and met up with his companions, who had also dealt with the slave trader. The little girl introduced herself as Nemu and said that her home was wherever her older sister was. They figured she was talking about the orphanage, which took care of children. In the end, they brought Nemu back to the orphanage, and her sister was overjoyed to see her return. Nemu told her sister what had happened, and to show her gratitude, she invited Nito and his companions for tea. While the children, including Nemu, played inside the building, the adults talked about the encounter with the slave trader. The sister revealed that Nemu often sneaks out to play with her friends, and that she used to be fine back in better days. But now, the slave trade was on the rise again in the capital, even though it had been officially banned. Nemu came into the room to play with them, and they noticed a strange mark on her left arm. When they checked, the sister said that it was called a slave crest. A slave crest is a mark that traders carve into slaves as proof of their servitude. It's usually reserved for male slaves, but it's also used on beast folk. Sometimes it's used as a mental shackle, meant to make the slave believe they will forever be a slave. According to the sister, although the crest has no special effects, those who bear it eventually give up on escaping. Nito thought about the cruelty of the slave trade and wished he had killed the slave trader and his lackeys when he had the chance. Sierra and Toa pulled him out of his thoughts, promising to handle the rest of the incident. By the end of the day, Sierra and Toa had captured the slave traders and tied them up, then called the authorities to take over. Everything was over. But as they were leaving, Nemu was sad about Nito leaving soon. He promised to see her the next day and told her to avoid going out alone. Meanwhile, Toa asked if he really intended to visit Nemu the next day. Nito replied that it was just something he had to say to comfort the little girl. Nito watched Nemu playing with her friends as if nothing had happened, leading him to conclude that she probably didn't remember anything that had occurred. The next morning, Nito Masamune was surprised to see Nemu cheerfully approaching him. She said she had come to see him, and what struck him as odd was that she called him master. Nito could only hope this had nothing to do with the slave mark. Nito walked through town with Nemu, with Toa and Sierra following behind, curious about their destination. Nemu asked where they were going, and Nito explained that they were on their way to the guild. He had been staying at Sierra's house for a while, but felt he had overstayed his welcome and was now ready to continue his adventure and find a way to earn money. Nemu clapped in praise, calling him a true adventurer. Toa and Sierra overheard Nemu calling Nito master and curiously asked why. Nito was a bit flustered, insisting that he had never asked for that title. But Toa and Sierra found it strange. Toa immediately asked Nemu, and the little girl explained that her mother taught her that if someone saves your life, you must love them forever, so Nito was her master. Satisfied with Nemu's explanation, Toa decided to just accept it. While walking, the group unexpectedly ran into Sharon at the market. It turned out she knew Nemu and expressed surprise at seeing Nito's group acquainted with her. Nemu introduced Nito as her master, which intrigued Sharon. Upon entering the shop, Sharon noticed the slave mark on Nemu's hand. And after Nemu recounted the whole story, she understood the situation. Sharon was very grateful to Nito for saving Nemu. She revealed that Nemu often visited her shop and that she thought of her like a daughter. Sharon admitted that she wanted to beat up the people who had harmed Nemu, and expressed disbelief that the day to part with Nemu was approaching. Turning to Nito, Sharon stressed that he shouldn't let Nemu down, since she had chosen him as her master. Half-jokingly, she warned Nito that if anything happened to Nemu, she would rush over and give him a punch. This made Nito wonder if there was some deeper meaning behind being Nemu's master. Suddenly, a customer entered the shop, surprised to see Sierra. He mentioned that he had been looking for her for a long time. Sierra casually called him Edward, teasing him about keeping up an appearance with a fashion sense from years ago. He justified his plain attire, saying it was just his everyday style. Sierra introduced her companions, and Edward, recognizing them from rumors, revealed that he was Edward Scotch, one of the king's white knights. Sierra curiously asked why he was looking for her, and he handed her a request letter, saying it was from the king. In the request letter, it was revealed that a basilisk had appeared in a town called WIC, specifically in a stable owned by a rancher named Boreas, who was a friend of the king. Nemu got excited and shared with Nito that she knew quite a bit about basilisks. Sierra curiously asked why the king had requested her specifically, and Edward explained that he didn't know. He was only ordered to deliver the quest to her. He was confident the king had his reasons for choosing her. Sharon then added a request of her own, mentioning that she also needed some materials from the basilisk, which she used to make certain medicines. She needed the tear glands, poison glands, and large fangs, as she had run out recently. She said she would be very grateful if they could get those for her after dealing with the monster. Nito and Toa were ready to join Sierra on this quest, and Sharon suggested taking Nemu along. However, Nito hesitated because he felt Nemu was too young. Nemu was disappointed that Nito wanted to go without her. Nito explained that they would be facing a monster and that it could be very dangerous. However, the shopkeeper vouched for Nemu's healing skills, stressing that she might even be stronger than Nito. Nito agreed to take Nemu along just this once. As they began their journey, Sierra expressed her annoyance about hunting the basilisk, feeling it should have been a job for the Adventurers Guild. Nito suggested they should think of it as a favor for Sharon and wondered why Sierra was so affected by it. Toa was curious about Nemu's abilities, asking if she could use magic. Nemu admitted that she couldn't, but mentioned a skill called Cat Fist. When Nito wondered what Cat Fist was, Nemu excitedly prepared to explain, but realized she wasn't entirely sure about it either. All she knew was that it was a beast art passed down to those of the cat race. Sierra explained that beast arts are a form of martial arts, particularly mastered by those of the beast races, and its details vary depending on the race. In Nemu's homeland, it's called Cat Fist. Nito concluded that Cat Fist wasn't a form of magic but actually a technique. Nemu added that she considered herself a cat wizard, which meant that if she learned about magic, she would be able to use it. Cat Wizard is a class exclusive to the cat race. It's an innate class and is considered one of the advanced classes. Nito asked Sierra if there were classes that weren't innate. Sierra confirmed that was true, sharing her own journey from being a regular knight to an elite knight. Nito curiously asked if he could change from a healer to a priest, but Sierra regretfully informed him that priest is also an innate class, with most classes having predetermined advancement paths. Unfortunately, there are no known advancement paths for the healer class. This realization saddened Nito, as he understood that he might be a healer forever. Nemu noticed Nito's mood and cheerfully assured him that she would protect him. Sierra informed them that getting to WIC would take some time, as it was quite a long journey. Naito wondered if it was right to leave the capital, but Sierra reassured him, explaining that it was the king's order. She then showed Nito a ring, mentioning she had seen Annette talking to her own ring earlier. Naito asked if the ring allowed for long-distance communication, and Sierra confirmed that every knight of the king was required to have one. Nito revealed that he had one too, though he'd never used it. He found it convenient since it allowed communication regardless of distance. However, Sierra pointed out that her ring only worked within the kingdom. She curiously asked Nito if his ring worked outside the kingdom's borders, and he confirmed that it did. Slightly surprised, Sierra speculated that Nito's ring must be very valuable and made from high-quality materials, and wondered if it was a gift from a friend. Nito recounted his experience with the Saige organization and Dragonheart, leaving Sierra and Toa astonished. Sierra elaborated on Dragonheart's fearsome reputation, known for eliminating powerful figures, corrupt individuals, and murderers. She noted that many nations had placed large bounties on the organization for their ruthless actions. Sierra recounted an incident that occurred in the kingdom of Toyrant, where members of Dragonheart killed not only the queen but also anyone associated with her, including children. She asked Nito what he would do about their invitation to join, and Nito admitted he didn't know, as he had no idea when he would see them again. Sierra said that no one currently knew Dragonheart's whereabouts, but Nito remembered they had mentioned they were on their way to Grey Belka. Coincidentally, the members of Dragonheart had just arrived in Grey Belka and were ordered to halt and remove their hoods by the guards. Eliza expressed concern at seeing only 2 guards, but Alfred reassured her, suggesting the others might be busy fighting monsters. However, Alfred recalled that there were more guards during his previous visit. Suddenly, the situation changed as they realized they were surrounded by the kingdom's soldiers on horseback. An elderly man, Mantis Mountain, ordered the guards to stand down, asserting they were no match for Dragonheart. He insisted on confronting them alone. He recognized Alfred and expressed his joy at seeing him well, but he also reprimanded Alfred for associating with Dragonheart, calling them swindlers, and warned of the king's disappointment upon learning of it. Alfred advised him to drop the facade, prompting the man to question Alfred's purpose in the kingdom, as it seemed he had no intention of returning home. Sieg stepped forward, introduced himself, and bluntly informed the old man about information concerning Grabelka's involvement in forbidden magic, the hero summoning, a dark practice requiring great sacrifice. Sieg demanded an immediate answer. He also warned of the dire consequences for everyone involved, emphasizing the chaos the forbidden magic could unleash upon the world. The old man vowed not to let them go any further. Sieg decided to fight the man, and Alfred warned Sieg that while the man's appearance might be deceiving, he was still a mage. Sieg promised he wouldn't hold back against the great mage known as the Mage of the Forest. Both began to activate their magic. The man introduced himself as Albert Morlow and promised to end Sieg's life. After a fierce battle, Sieg emerged victorious, leaving Albert Morlow severely wounded. Albert began to suspect that Sieg might not be an ordinary human, seeing how easily Sieg defeated him. The idea of Sieg being a dragon crossed Albert's mind, reminding him of an encounter from his youth. When Albert asked Sieg about this, Sieg replied that he was under no obligation to answer such questions. Although Albert tried to emotionally manipulate Sieg into revealing the truth, Sieg dismissed him and instead repeated his question about Grey Belka's involvement in the hero summoning. The man confessed to it, but claimed that the summoning had taken place a month ago, and there was no longer any evidence. Sieg said that didn't matter. The mere admission that a summoning took place was enough. Albert warned Sieg that what he was about to do wasn't justice, but a meaningless bloodbath. Sieg clarified that it wasn't about justice or evil, but about conviction, stressing that it was never a matter of choosing between the two. As they were leaving, Albert tried to emotionally manipulate Alfred into reconsidering, but Alfred, who was familiar with his tactics, flatly refused. He pointed out the country's crimes, arguing that it was all foolish and preordained. Albert defended their actions, arguing that humans needed to behave that way. In response, Albert coldly urged the man to die quickly before leaving in his final moments. The man observed that Alfred was no longer the prince he once knew. Nito's party arrived in WIC, captivated by the bustling atmosphere of the merchant town and its charming scenery. They acknowledged that the place truly lived up to its reputation. Nito informed Nimue that they needed to visit the farm first. Upon arriving at the farm, they witnessed villagers protesting against the farm's owner, Boreas Wick. The protesters demanded he abandon the farm because of the basilisk threat, citing unfulfilled promises from the kingdom. Sierra interrupted the protest, announcing her presence and causing the protesters to disperse, relieved that help had finally arrived. However, a well-dressed man among them looked displeased and left in frustration. Nimue detected an unusual scent in the air, which made Nito wonder. She revealed that she felt something was off. Boreas gave them a warm welcome, expressing his joy at their arrival. Sierra apologized for being late. Curious about their plan, Boreas asked when they intended to destroy the monster. Nito suggested they get the job done today, eager to explore more of the town afterward. Boreas, aware that basilisks are formidable monsters, expressed his concern. Drawing on his experience as an adventurer, he suggested conducting a thorough investigation before taking further action. Sierra reassured the man, saying everything would be fine with Nito around. Nito realized that Sierra was unintentionally relying on him. Even though the request was assigned to her, she also couldn't keep his real name a secret. They agreed to investigate Boreas' barn, and Boreas handed the key to Nito. Nemu then warned the group that she sensed the same smell she had detected from the man in the fancy cloak emanating from the barn. Nito suspected it might be the basilisk's scent. He voiced his suspicions to Boreas, suggesting that August might be involved in the basilisk's sudden appearance, as they usually live deep in the forest. Nito speculated that August might have a hidden motive, possibly related to seizing Voyas's land. Nito praised Nemu for detecting the scent, which made her happy. They decided to devise a plan to drive the basilisk away without harm, aiming to return it to the forest while it was unconscious. To their surprise, Nito discovered not just one, but 3 basilisks upon checking the barn. Sierra was surprised because, according to the request she received, there was only 1 basilisk. The man revealed that he had seen one the day before, but Sierra insisted that the number couldn't have increased overnight. Frustrated, Sierra expressed her displeasure, prompting the man to admit that there had been 3 basilisks from the start. He explained that August, who had asked him to disclose the details of his request, had forced him to lie because if he revealed there were 3 basilisks, the townspeople would have taken more extreme measures to ensure he left the farm. Nito curiously asked Sierra if beheading the basilisks would kill them, and she confirmed this information. Nito decided to change the plan and handle the matter himself by killing the basilisks. He was determined to resolve the situation independently. Nemu worriedly expressed her concern for Nito, pointing out that as a healer, this situation was too dangerous for him. However, Nito confidently reassured her, asserting that it would be over in an instant. As he entered the battle, Nito reflected on the limitations of his Kuroda skill, realizing that he needed to gather materials beforehand and that using the skill would leave nothing behind. Instead, Nito decided to use his Beast King-style Godspeed skill, aiming to quickly eliminate all the basilisks at once. A wave of surprise spread through everyone as Nito emerged, proudly announcing that he had defeated the basilisks. Nemu was genuinely impressed that everything had happened just as Nito predicted. Swiftly and decisively, Nito turned to Sierra, suggesting they gather the materials Sharon needed. Toa examined the basilisks, noting that they seemed harmless and might have been raised by someone. Just then, August appeared, disappointed to see the basilisks defeated, which confirmed Nito's suspicions about his involvement. Gordon, who suddenly appeared behind August, asked which of the victims was Boreas so he could quickly take care of him. Seeing his basilisk dead, Gordon became enraged, demanding to know why his pets were killed. August started blaming Nito's group for killing Gordon's basilisks. Gordon's fury escalated, and he decided to take extreme measures, planning to cut off both women's limbs and drag them back to the inn. The fate of the 3 remaining basilisks was even darker. He planned to end their lives amidst this chaos. August blamed Boreas for refusing his offer. When Boreas asked August why he was so obsessed with this land, August revealed that he dreamed of building a magnificent mansion on the property, one befitting a prosperous merchant such as himself. Gordon informed August that 2 of the targets were clearly strong, suggesting double the payment to deal with them. August agreed to the increased bounty, but insisted he would pay nothing if the targets weren't harmed. Toa volunteered to face Gordon, but he suggested Sierra take on the challenge. Sierra enthusiastically accepted, and both girls, Toa and Sierra, asked Nito not to interfere in the upcoming battle. Gordon's annoyance with Nito grew as he expressed his contempt for a man who thought it was normal to be surrounded by women, considering whether he should deal with Nito first. Gordon's plan was abruptly interrupted when Sierra and Toa launched a surprise attack in unison. Despite their efforts, Gordon easily parried their blades with his great sword, acknowledging that they were spirited women. He amusingly wondered if they were really that eager to fight him. With a swift move, he forcefully pushed them back several meters. Undeterred, Sierra immediately charged him again, but retreated at the last second when she sensed he was about to unleash a powerful kick on her. Gordon, amused, observed their successful defense against his attack. He suspected that one of the two might be the king's white knight. Although he admitted he didn't know which one it was, he was confident he would find out soon enough. His assumption stemmed from the involvement of Boreas Wick, an old friend of King Arnold of Rosehausen, and Gordon believed the king wouldn't send just any ordinary adventurers to help his friend. Sierra retorted, pointing out that those were merely assumptions as she continued her assault. Gordon skillfully dodged all of Sierra's attacks, eventually catching her sword and remarking as if he just had a profound realization. He told her he knew she was the White Knight. Sierra, who was actually acting as a decoy, suddenly shouted Toe's name, prompting Toe to launch a powerful lightning attack on Gordon. Despite surviving the lightning assault, Gordon still activated his berserk skill, causing Sierra to look on in dismay as she recognized it as a dark magic attribute. Gordon, addressing Sierra as the king's white knight, stressed the skill's power, claiming it wouldn't work on him anymore in his new form. Nito remarked on the magic's ominous appearance, but Gordon was unconcerned, asserting that he was busy with the two women. Undaunted, Sierra decided to confront Gordon head-on, ignoring the warning. To her surprise, when her sword made contact with Gordon's body, it was met with an unexpected level of hardness, causing her blade to shatter in two. In her state of shock, Gordon seized the opportunity and delivered a powerful punch to Sierra, sending her flying until she crashed into a nearby tree. He pointed out that she seemed unaware of the magic, explaining that in this state, he was immune to both physical and magical attacks. As Gordon was about to deliver a finishing blow with his sword, Toe, sneaking up from behind, skillfully used a combination of her two abilities, Lightning Soul and Lightning Phase. This allowed her to bypass Gordon's hardened skin and slash his neck with her sword. Gordon immediately collapsed, while Toa extended a hand to help Sierra, suggesting she consider it a gift for letting her stay at her home. However, their expressions suddenly changed as Gordon's wound unexpectedly regenerated, healing almost instantly, reminding them of his earlier claim of being invincible in this state. Gordon revealed that this regeneration was the true nature of the berserk magic. With a swift activation of his cursed javelin magic, he nearly used the javelin to attack both girls at the same time. Just then, Nito successfully intervened, blocking the attack and causing Gordon to instantly explode, leaving only a piece of his arm behind. August, surprised by Gordon's failure, was confronted by Nito, who asked if he wanted the same fate. Turning to Boreas for guidance, Nito asked for his decision on what to do with August, promising to follow whatever course of action Boreas saw fit. In a rushed plea, August lunged towards Boreas, begging for his life and vowing never to repeat his actions. Boreas stood firm, explaining that the land was an ancestral heritage, making it impossible for him to sell it to someone seeking personal gain. However, Boreas offered him a chance to live, promising to spare August's life on the condition that he leave the land undisturbed. Relieved, August quickly agreed and left. With the tense situation resolved, Boreas helped them gather all the necessary materials. Apologizing for not being able to offer a larger reward due to his limited finances, Boreas compensated them by gifting some Stein meat he had raised himself and some luxurious Yoa Stein cuts as a token of his gratitude. Nito thanked Boreas for the thoughtful gift, sincerely expressing his gratitude. Boreas also showed his appreciation, assuring them he would protect the farm with all his heart. As the group left the farm, the girls curiously asked about Nito's sudden improvement in swordsmanship. They recalled teaching him at home, noting his lack of proper footwork, Yet they had just witnessed a masterful performance when he faced the basilisk. Nito shared that he'd had these sword skills all along, but struggled to explain how. Sierra, showing her faith and trust in Nito, acknowledged that he might have his own personal reasons for his abilities. With this new understanding, the group decided to go shopping together in the city, enjoying the friendship and trust that bound them together. It seemed To couldn't take her eyes off the reward. She kept staring at the heavy pile of meat they had won from defeating the basilisk. Back at the farm, Nemu teased To about this, but she quickly denied it, retorting that Nemu was the one being weird. Nemu protested, saying she was actually preoccupied with other things, specifically a necklace she had just spotted. The shopkeeper noticed Nemu's excitement and asked if she liked the necklace, adding that if so, she had a good eye. The necklace featured a crystal stone from Pastella, but that country no longer existed. If Nemu really liked this necklace, it would be best to buy it now before these crystal stones become impossible to find. Sierra noted that crystals collected from Pastella were very popular. Their color was blue, but if worn for a long time, they would react to the owner's magical power and change color. In fact, it was a very interesting type of stone. Depending on the quality of the owner's magical power, the crystal's purity would also change. The color it transformed into was an exciting mystery for the necklace's owner to look forward to. The necklace cost 3,000 Ryan, and Nito decided to buy 3, one for each of his friends. So generous, Nemu happily accepted her necklace. While Toa wanted Nito to put the necklace on for her personally, but perhaps she just wanted a chance to flirt and steal a moment with her crush. However, the moment with Toa turned awkward. Nito, flustered and blushing, then asked Sierra if she wanted the same treatment. Sierra replied that she would put her own necklace on, as she had also noticed the shift in the atmosphere. Moving on, they came across an interesting-looking bar and decided to stop in. The bar was lined with shelves of different liquors. A bartender approached them and asked if they needed any help. Nito declined, and the bartender suggested they should buy something, personally advising them that it was a rather expensive shop. Just then, Nito noticed a poster on the wall. The bartender followed his gaze and explained that the drink advertised on the poster was out of stock. It was the vintage wine, Old GRT, often called the ghost wine. The fact that Nito didn't seem to recognize this wine surprised the bartender. He went on to explain that this wine was no longer produced, at least as far as the world knew. However, Nito couldn't help but remember seeing it somewhere before. He thought back and remembered it was the same wine he had drunk while he was depressed, which led to his death in the other world. Nito took the bottle from under his coat, wanting to confirm if it was the very same one. The bartender was completely astonished and asked to inspect the bottle. He said it had to be a fake, as there was no way someone could have access to the original. Nito offered the bartender a taste if he'd like. The bartender did so, and his shock grew even greater when he realized it was the real deal. He remembered a time when he secretly went into his father's study to sip some old GRT. Even though it had been a long time, he could never forget the taste. Nito had a genuine bottle of old GRT, and now the question was where he got it. Nito replied that he found it in a dungeon. The waiter then made an offer, 10 million Ryan for the bottle of wine. But there was more to it. They could take any wine in the store, anything they wanted was theirs. Nito asked the waiter to calm down, as it all sounded a bit much for just one bottle of wine. The waiter kindly explained that 10 million Ryan wasn't even enough to reflect the bottle's true value. This was a wine that was no longer in production, so wine lovers were willing to pay a very high price for it. Nobles would bid anywhere from 100 million Ryan to 1 billion Ryan. Just the thought of Nito having drunk such a high-class wine left the waiter even more astonished. He offered them 30 million Ryan on the spot, which, according to him, was all the cash he had on hand. However, he also mentioned he had connections and could sell the bottle to a noble for up to 1 billion Ryan and would split it with them 50-50. Nito thought to himself that the employee had no idea he still had 100 more of those bottles in his storage space. In the end, Nito decided to sell the bottle for 30 million and collect half of the sale price after it was sold to the noble. The employee quickly ran off and returned with 30 million in cash that had been withdrawn from the bank. Nito was genuinely surprised to learn that banks existed in this world. And just like that, they had become millionaires. The conversation led to the revelation that Sierra knew about old GRT wine because her father owned a vineyard. The shopkeeper asked if she was a member of the Icarlot family, and she confirmed that she was. With the money in hand, Nito offered to buy Sierra a new sword since her old one was broken. He also wanted to go shopping for some new clothes for both of them, including Nemu. Sierra remembered that Nito had a snake sword he had found in a dungeon. Items from dungeons are often unidentified items, where one might find legendary, mythical, or miracle-grade swords. Weapons, consumables, and materials from monsters are all classified by grade depending on their value. The lowest grade is common, and the highest is miracle grade. The shopkeeper advised Nito to get the sword appraised to find out its value and offered to lead them to a shop where they could do that. Nito recalled that the sword originally belonged to Xiaoyan, so it was definitely a high-grade sword. They arrived at a shop called KK Toy, a general store built by the large KK Group Corporation. The shop specialized in magical equipment. The shopkeeper advised that it would be best to let everyone think the sword belonged to him, so he would be the one to take it to the counter and request an appraisal. While waiting for the results on the sword's value, he told Nito and his group that they could go look around. Nito announced that he was going to check on Nemu, who seemed to have run off like kids often do. He told Sierra that this was her chance to look for a replacement for her broken rapier. Sierra wondered if Nito really needed to do all this for her, and if so, how she would ever repay him. He simply told her to stop worrying about repaying him and to consider him buying her a new rapier as rent for staying at her place. Sierra decided that was a fair deal and left it at that. While they were looking around, To mentioned that she wouldn't mind having a set of light armor either. A shop clerk showed her a set of armor in a glass case. At first, the armor looked heavy to To, but on the contrary, it was light and made from wyvern scales, a rare grade material that caught Nito's attention. Then, Nito saw a room that caught his eye, and he asked the manager about it. He was told it was the National Treasure grade room for customers with a high budget. When the shop clerk learned that Nito had 10 million Ryan on him, she was astonished and quickly invited the valuable customer into the high-class room. Toa advised Nito not to spend all that money at once, saying that he didn't have to buy her anything. However, he countered that high-end armor was a smart decision if they could afford it. And besides, money comes and goes. It's meant to be used to earn more on quests. They came across a weapon called the Angel's Protective Armor, made by a high-ranking alchemist with a combination of National Treasure-grade materials and minerals. It sounded even more appealing than the armor they had looked at earlier, and it cost 1.5 million. But Nito was willing to spend big for his friends. While To was led away to try on her new gear, Nemu appeared beside Nito, realizing that she needed armor too. Nito approached a shop clerk and asked about buying protective armor for Nemu, especially since the other girls were already taken care of. The clerk recommended a unique item, a suit of mithril armor, crafted by a high-elf alchemist and a skilled tailor. This armor had a thin and flexible layer of mithril, designed to be worn underneath other clothing. The highlight of the armor was its ability to stretch with the wearer's height, ensuring it would still fit even as Nemu grew taller. The 2 million Rione price tag surprised everyone, but Nito, whose main concern was functionality, considered it a worthy investment for the job it was designed to do. Toa reappeared with new equipment, along with her new outfit. Nito was completely surprised and started to blush, but he quickly regained his composure. The outfit looked great on To, and the new clothes were a bonus from the shop staff, which was amazing. Nemu also received a bonus outfit designed especially for cat people, with a hat that could accommodate her ears. She looked very happy in it. Sierra found a sword that caught her eye. The sword was said to be forged from a unicorn's horn, and its name was Arda. It was a high-quality ice sword and cost 5 million rione. It had a core ice attribute, not an elemental one, and would be a perfect match for Sierra, who uses ice magic. Sierra clearly wanted the sword, though she protested that it was too expensive. Nito decided to buy the sword for her. The staff member from the bar returned with the sword and informed Nito that he had become the owner of a mythical-grade sword. This was an extremely rare item, as people didn't even believe mythical-grade items existed, which is why they were called mythical in the first place. In the end, Nito decided to give the snake sword to Toa, since he felt he had no use for it. As a healer, the sword didn't suit him. Toa then traded the sword she already had with Nito, making the deal more fair. The shop staff teased Nito about having such a big heart for giving away such a valuable item. In his heart, Nito felt it was all worth it. Before, he had felt so lonely, but now, with the company of his 3 dear friends, he could confidently say that everything had changed. In a grim turn of events, news of the death of the mage Albert Marlowe reached the king. The king, deeply affected by this loss, held a memorial service to honor his dear friend. Albert Marlowe was not just a talented mage, but also a trusted advisor who had dedicated his wisdom and skills to supporting the king and the country for a long time. As the kingdom gathered to pay their respects and remember Albert's contributions, the air was heavy with loss, and a somber speech was delivered to the assembled crowd. The king announced the tragic news of Albert's death, attributing the cause to the organization Dragon's Heart. He solemnly promised to put an end to this organization himself, a long-standing threat to the country, and vowed to avenge his fallen friend. Meanwhile, at the Grey Belka Academy's training grounds, Aries delivered the heartbreaking news of Albert's death to her students. She recounted that, in response to reports of Dragon's Heart members appearing at the border, Albert had gone to investigate himself. It was during that mission that he met his unexpected end, casting a dark shadow over the academy. Overcome with emotion, she encouraged the students to carry on Albert's will. The students took turns sharing memories of how Albert had treated them with kindness. For this very reason, they would gladly carry on Albert's will, which was to defeat the demon lord and bring peace to the world, a philosophy the academy had always upheld. Aries reminded the students that they were the hope of the nation and urged them to pour all their strength into their training. While everyone else continued to train hard, Ichijo was confronted by Saeki, who asked him why he was resting under a tree while everyone else was working hard. Following Aries' call to action, Ichijo replied that he understood the situation, but that didn't mean he couldn't take a break. The body needs rest too. He also confronted the clique that had formed against him for always bullying him. Ichijo thought to himself that perhaps this was how Hidaka must have felt. Saeki's anger flared, and he fiercely demanded that Ichijo stop speaking ill of the dead. The situation grew tense, but Ichijo stood his ground, retorting that the same rules of respect should apply to Albert, who was the cause of the current uproar. Ichijo then steered the conversation into deeper matters, challenging the sincerity of Aries' words. He implied that Aries might have a hidden motive, accusing her of using impactful events like the great sage's death to manipulate emotions. According to Ichijo, Aries employs a strategy of discussing uncomfortable topics, like the deaths of warriors at the hands of monsters, to make the students feel pressured to increase their training efforts. To him, this tactic feels like a form of brainwashing, making him suspicious of Aries' intentions and methods. A sensei who was monitoring the conversation intervenes, asking about the nature of their discussion and half-jokingly suggesting it was one of their usual quarrels. Quick-witted, they tell a white lie, claiming they were actually discussing strategies. The sensei, with a light pat on Saeki's back, expresses his faith in him, saying they are counting on his leadership. After the sensei leaves, the atmosphere instantly changes. Ichijo, ever the provocateur, mocks Saeki for what he perceives as emotional vulnerability. The urge for physical retaliation rises in Saeki, but he restrains himself. Saeki powerfully declares that he doesn't care about Ichijo's opinion and firmly asserts his decision not to report the rebellious act. Two girls join the conversation, easily siding with Seki. Ichijo then activates an explosive skill and criticizes the girls for always taking one side and following a leader like a shadow. They hide behind that leader, pretending to be brave so they can talk smart because they think they're on the winning team. Ichijo saw how cruelly Hidaka was treated, and it disgusts him. Saiki calls Ichijo a coward for using magic to intimidate them. He rushes at Ichijo, warning him that he should spend his time thinking about who's really in the wrong. Saiki and his lackeys leave, and Ichijo can't believe that no one else can see the truth. Ares was the one who cast Hidaka out without a shred of regret. This leads Ichijo to believe that all the students here are just pawns for convenience. When they become a nuisance, they can be easily discarded, thrown out, or even killed. Furthermore, Ichijo is convinced that Hidaka is still alive and well in Rashausen. Sharon is shocked to see that Nito and his friends have successfully hunted and defeated 3 basilisks, since even one is very dangerous. In a secret exchange, Nito, who had instructed Nemu to keep their role in defeating the basilisks a secret, now asks Sharon about the materials she requested. Sharon, with an air of mystery, reveals her ambitious plan to craft a miracle drug. However, her true purpose surprises both Nito and Nemu. Sharon reveals that the drug's primary goal is to erase Nemu's slave mark, a revelation that leaves Nito stunned. The concept that a slave mark, usually considered an indelible sign, could be erased is new to him. Sharon suggests that this crucial detail is not widely known. As the drug's main purpose remains shrouded in secrecy, Sharon warns Nemu that the process will be a little painful, telling her to prepare herself. She also tells Nito to be ready to use recovery magic as needed. Sharon then rolls up Nemu's sleeve to reveal the mark on her arm and begins to pour the miracle drug on it. Nemu confirms that removing the mark is indeed very painful. As the mark begins to dissolve, Nito casts his recovery magic, and Nemu confirms that she's no longer dizzy and in pain. That's good to hear. To voices her thoughts, suggesting the miracle drug is a harsh one. Sharon explains that if the toxin dosage is increased when combining the materials, it becomes a mark-erasing drug. This causes intense pain because it melts the top layer of skin. Sharon goes on to comment on Nito's recovery skill, saying it's the first time she's seen a recovery spell work so quickly, and that it even helps with fatigue. Sierra is also surprised, as she thought Nito was only familiar with enhancement magic. Typically, healers aren't expected to know much more than recovery magic, so they're often labeled the weakest link in a party. Nito, however, is different and is no ordinary healer. He can use enhancement magic, which boosts attack and defense, also known as aura odium in high-level magic. Continuing under the alias Nito, Hidaka experiences a rapid rise through the hunter ranks, achieving the impressive milestone of being promoted to B rank shortly after successfully defeating the basilisks. To add to the surprise, To also achieves a promotion to A rank in just a few days, leaving them both in a state of astonishment. Even the guildmaster acknowledges their exceptional talent, a recognition that makes their promotions all the more special. The rarity of these rapid advancements becomes clear, as it usually takes a hunter up to a year to rank up once. Hidaka's remarkable leap from F rank to B rank in such a short time defied normal expectations, leading to speculation about the extraordinary circumstances that facilitated this rapid advancement. The guildmaster's decision hinted at the exceptional nature of Hidaka's achievements. Sierra wasn't left out either. She also received recognition for the reward for conquering Newt Kalain. Hearing this, Hidaka started to panic. If this was the real reason behind his promotion, then the White Knights must have discovered that he was using Nito as an alias. They must know his true identity. While Hidaka was panicking, a troublesome man appeared, trying to bully him. It was someone Hidaka had met before. Unfortunately, Sierra excused herself from the scene, saying she had just received a call from Annette and had been summoned to headquarters for a meeting. The man continued to cause trouble, and Nemu punched him square in the face, The punch sent the guy flying across the room. It turned out he was just a drunk, but on the bright side, he was pretty insignificant. Hidaka briefly pondered Nemu's punch and concluded that she was much stronger than most healers. This made Hidaka question why she hadn't thought of using such strength when she was kidnapped by the slavers. Nemu replied that she didn't feel strong at the time. To reasoned that Nemu might have inhaled catnip back then, which would explain her dizziness. To knew this because she had a cat person servant back at the castle. It was that servant who told her that the cat tribe can act drunk when exposed to catnip, though over time, they can become immune to the scent through training. But Nemu couldn't confirm whether she had ever undergone any such training. At the castle, in the White Knight's meeting room, Sierra entered and apologized for being late. Present were the White Knights from the 2nd to the 6th seat, while Sierra was the 7th seat. One of the knights revealed that they planned to keep Hidaka under surveillance. The king was already aware of what was happening at the WIC, but that wasn't the main point of the meeting. Reinhardt revealed that Dragon's Heart had appeared in Grey Belka. Hearing this, Sierra struggled with her duty as a White Knight to reveal that Hidaka was being recruited to join Dragon's Heart. But getting back to the main topic, in Grey Belka, a forbidden hero summoning ritual had been performed. Raid Black was quite excited to hear about the hero summoning, exclaiming that the ones who performed the ritual had finally done the worst. He instinctively linked the appearance of Dragon's Heart in Grey Belka with the summoning ritual, alarming most of the White Knights. The summoning ritual would undoubtedly bring chaos. Reinhardt Rickman, the 2nd Knight of the White Knights, confirmed their fears by revealing that there had been a death from the summoning ritual, that of the powerful mage Albert Morlow. Edward Scotch, one of the seated knights at the meeting, recognized the name as that of a brilliant mage, who was once one of the old empire's most dangerous mages during the war long ago. Raid, savoring the unfolding chaos, added that with the incident in the Toyrant Kingdom, the enemy would surely have other plans after killing Albert Morlow. The fact was that only one mage had been eliminated, albeit a powerful one who stood in their way. Meanwhile, the entire discussion left Sierra feeling confused, as she had no idea what a hero summoning ritual was. Her lack of knowledge surprised Raid at first, but since this information was critical and essential, usually kept from the public, he decided to take it upon himself to explain. He explained that hero summoning is a type of summoning magic. However, it's completely different from the summoning magic people are familiar with. It's a spell that summons heroes from other worlds. Sierra tried to understand the context of heroes and asked if they were like the ones mentioned in fairy tales. Raid appreciated that she had the right idea, but pointed out that she wasn't entirely correct. Hero is just a general term for any being that has been summoned, usually a human. According to ancient texts, there was one time in history when a creature was summoned that couldn't communicate like normal heroes. Usually, a summoned hero receives divine protection called a blessing. They sometimes have abnormally high stats and are equipped with knowledge of high-level magic spells, which are rarely seen, let alone used. Some of these heroes have excellent skill classes with unique abilities right from the start. Sooner or later, they become curious about the hidden part, why this magic is considered forbidden. In response to Sierra's curious question, Reinhardt Rickman replied that the summoning is forbidden because it requires human sacrifices to perform the hero summoning spell. The mages need a vast amount of magic, which means they need to access the magic core. Sierra then asked why humans were necessary if the requirement was a magic core, since other creatures also possess one, as Raid had mentioned earlier. Reinhardt reminded her that there was a time when a creature was summoned that caused great damage. That event occurred due to using creatures as sacrifices, resulting in a being that couldn't communicate or even reason, ending in a brutal rampage. To avoid repeating the same tragedy, only humans are now used for the ritual. Unfortunately, the most terrifying part wasn't the sacrifices, but the fact that to fully access the magic core, the mages must plunge the sacrifices into fear and despair. Naturally, the core is in a restrained state, as it's designed to supply just enough power for its host's body without breaking it. The amount of magic needed can't be easily gathered just by sacrificing them. As limiters reduce the power available for the ritual, the core's limiters must be removed. And the fastest way to do this is through torture. The sacrifices are driven into fear and pain until they are broken. The torture isn't enough to kill them because if a sacrifice dies, the core dies with it. When the body's broken and the mind is shattered, the limiters are released, causing the body to emit a massive light and energy, activating the hero summoning. Sierra tried to comprehend the number of people who had to endure such pain and asked about the number of sacrifices needed for one hero summoning ritual. Sadly, no one knew the exact number. Raid estimated that it could be hundreds or even thousands of people, recalling a time in the past when a hero summoning ritual was performed and all the people in one country mysteriously vanished. Sierra was horrified by this new knowledge, realizing that such pain and loss had occurred, leading to the deaths of so many lives. Reinhardt concludes the conversation about the hero summoning ritual, reminding everyone that even if Dragon's Heart doesn't cause further harm to Grey Belka, they still plan to wage war against the monsters. He also asks if any other knights have anything to report so the meeting can move forward. Daniel King, the knight in the second seat, reports on the theft of Newt Kalane's corpse by an unknown individual. Meanwhile, Nito prepares to host a barbecue, something they haven't done in a long time. The Akarlet sisters, Hilda and Sierra, used to have barbecues often, so having a party like this brings back many fond memories for them. Nito invites the Ekarlat staff and workers to join the barbecue since there's plenty of meat. The staff humbly accepts the invitation, but are skeptical that there will be enough meat for everyone because there are 15 servants in total. Nito assures them that the Wallstein meat he bought earlier and the Joastein meat he received on a mission will be enough for the whole household, including the staff. Nito explains that this is his way of repaying the kindness they've shown him during his stay. Everyone is called to the barbecue, and Nito provides them with barrels of wine, assuring them he has plenty more. The staff, who pride themselves on running a vineyard, are very particular about wine and inspect the barrel Nito provided. Upon learning that it's a rare aged GRT wine, the party becomes lively and everyone has a good time. When Nito notices that Sierra seems down during the event, he becomes curious. Nito sits next to Sierra and asks her what's bothering her. She asks if he knows about the hero's summoning spell, which surprises Nito. He confirms that he does. Sierra goes on to ask if he knows why this magic is considered forbidden. Nito answers calmly, which surprises Sierra as she didn't expect him to be so composed. She tells him what she learned at the meeting, leaving Nito in shock to learn that torture is a cruel but essential part of this ritual. Although this is necessary knowledge for the Knights of the White King, it deeply disturbs Sierra, making her fear magic and want to run away from the truth, wishing to forget that this kind of magic even exists. Nito encourages her, assuring her that not all magic requires sacrifice, so she shouldn't worry about it. If there's magic that can protect people, then there's surely magic that can harm them. The important part is how that magic is used. Nito adds that if she still feels uneasy about this, she can always talk to the people by her side, meaning him, To, Nemu, and her sister, Hilda. He promises to stay by her side until she feels better. Sierra feels relieved and hugs him, asking him to call her by her name without any titles. As they share this friendly exchange, Nemu sees Sierra hugging Nito and rushes over, feeling jealous. She confronts Sierra for flirting with her master, Nito, crying out that it's unfair. She hugs Nito, pulling him away from Sierra. Sierra shyly denies that she was flirting with Nito, even as Nemu adds that she saw Sierra hugging him, and so did Toa. Toa calmly approaches the group and expresses that she's just happy to see Sierra in a better mood. Nito then explains to Nemu that Sierra wasn't trying to flirt with him or be unfair. She just needed some comfort. Nemu remains adamant and perceptive, as she also noticed that he called Sierra just by her name. After the drama subsides, Toe gets updated on what Sierra learned and also wonders if it's okay for such magic to exist, adding that this is the first time she's heard of it. Nido curiously asks why the hero's summoning was brought up in the meeting. Sierra explains that the public will soon hear about the forbidden magic ritual being performed in Grey Belka. Since Nido is acting so calm, Sierra suspects he knows something more about these events and questions him. Under pressure, Nido reveals that he overheard it from the members of Dragon's Heart as they were leaving. He goes on to inform them that Grey Belka is conducting a hero summoning and that Dragon's Heart is going to verify the truth. Sensing that something is being left out, Sierra asks if there's anything else being hidden. Nido nervously wonders if Sierra has figured out his secret, but he realizes it's better to reveal it since he's already done some inexplicable things in front of her. One of the heroes summoned to their world was Nito, also known as Masamune, and he had been keeping this a secret for a long time. Finally, he reveals this information to Sierra, and she starts connecting the dots based on what she learned from Raid. She understands why he knew so little about their world and had extraordinary abilities, as Red had mentioned, and that he clearly had a blessing. Nido corrects one thing in her deduction, the fact that he isn't a true hero, despite being summoned to their world. Nito explains that he was abandoned because he was a healer, the lowest class. He also adds that he's glad it happened, because he got to meet the three of them. Sierra, still trying to process everything she just heard, asks if he was abandoned. Does that mean there are other summoned heroes, and are there even stronger ones? Nito confirms that there are other heroes with higher classes. Toa disagrees, arguing that the other heroes aren't stronger than Nito, even though they're supposed to be. This leaves Nemu and Sierra feeling confused, as they've never seen Nito's true strength. When he shows them his stats, they're shocked by how high his levels are, and now they understand what Toa was talking about. Afterwards, Nito runs into Hilda as she approaches him. Expressing how happy she is to see him with Sierra, she adds that everyone is happy Sierra finally has a friend. Hilda goes on to suggest that he take Sierra with him when he plans to leave the country. After making that request, she wishes him good night and heads back to her room. Shortly after, Nito takes out the Dragon Crystal Magic Ring, which connects him to a member of Dragonheart. As he slips the ring onto his finger, the connection is established and the communication begins. Nito informs the member that he heard about the attack on Grey Belka and thought they would have acted more peacefully. But now, this meant that news had spread very quickly and far. Getting straight to the point, he asked for Nito's help in dealing with King Johannes and Princess Ares, the ones behind the hero summoning. Since this member used most of his magical power fighting the sorcerer Albert, he'll have trouble carrying out the next mission without Nito's support. This is the only chance they have to stop Grey Belka from starting a war in the near future. Nito agrees to help them this one time, but stresses that he is not their ally. The only reason he's helping is because his goal coincides with theirs. Nito holds a grudge against the king and princess of Grey Belka and is determined to kill them both. They also won't harm the summoned individuals, as they are innocent. Once the two sides reach an agreement, they decide on a meeting place using the ring. Wearing the ring on the middle finger and performing the transcode spell with a hand over the heart will activate the teleportation feature. Although Nito can travel to their location almost instantly, Dragonheart instructs him to wait for their signal. As he leaves the room to prepare, Nito bumps into Toa, who had been listening to the entire conversation through the ring. Toa asks who he was talking to, and since he's been caught, Nito has no choice but to confess. He tells her he was talking to Dragonheart. Hearing this, Toa knows what it means and tries her best to stop Nito from going back. The decision to go back for ELCA is one Nito made a long time ago, and he intended to go at some point. It's just that now is the right time, because if he doesn't go back, he can't get his revenge and will forever be a coward. Even when Toa points out that he's not going back to do good, but evil, something many people wouldn't accept, Nito remains adamant because he can't move forward without returning to Grey Belka. Toa strongly objects to his idea, as she herself was rejected by so many people in Grey Belka, and the truth is, she's afraid to go back there. Seeing Nito's determination to return, she decides to tell him something he doesn't know, as a last-ditch effort to convince him. At home, she always felt lonely and isolated, and she would distract herself by going into the treasure room and playing with the valuable items. One day, she found a mirror, and in the mirror, she saw a familiar figure appear. That person was just like her, lonely and walking through the darkness alone. Every time the mirror showed his image, he was injured and bleeding, but he never stopped walking. Whether hurt or in the dark, he kept going. He was a strong person. This story confuses Nito until he realizes that the person she's talking about is him. Toa confirms that she's been watching Nito ever since he was adventuring alone. When the mirror stopped showing his image, she stood before it, hoping to see him again, but to no avail. Just as she was about to give up, a spell suddenly activated and pulled her in. When she came to, she found herself in a forest and was quickly captured by bandits. Fortunately, she was rescued by Nito, which Toa believes wasn't a coincidence, but fate. Hearing this story, Nito understands Toa's attitude towards him. From the moment they met, he understood her concern. After hearing the story, Nito explained that the reason he kept pushing forward was because he was filled with hatred, with the goal of destroying the Grey Belka kingdom and those who had betrayed him. Once he explained his reasons, Toa agreed not to look down on him or hate him. Immediately, a signal from the dragon's heart came through, and they said their goodbyes. Toa promised to inform Sierra and Nemu, making sure they would understand. Nito appeared at the location of the dragon's heart, which was a nearby town. Because security in the capital had been tightened after Albert's death, Nito guessed the situation wasn't good, as there were so many guards. Luckily, when they first infiltrated, they had marked a teleportation point, and all they needed to do was activate that mark. Because Albert was gone, the detection barrier wasn't active, so they could approach easily. But before leaving the dragon's heart, Sieg asked Nito if he was truly capable of killing Johannes and Ares, since they were two powerful figures. Although they now sat on the throne, King Johannes was a former S-rank adventurer and an earth mage, while Ares was a user of teleportation magic and a famous assassin known as the Beheading Witch. Besides these two, there was another problem to worry about: the war with the monsters of Grey Belka. These monsters possessed high magical power, and the country had held out for a long time, which meant the nation also possessed other powerful adventurers like Lola, the Sword Piercer, and Zari, the Silent. Nito understood that the fight against Johannes and Ares would happen after he defeated these two. If Nito couldn't kill them all, they would fail in their objective. Sieg was confident that he could win in a one-on-one fight against the mentioned adventurers at his best condition. Nito was also determined and believed he could defeat all of them. They moved quickly and quietly into the city, but immediately met resistance, with many guards blocking their way. They would be in big trouble if more reinforcements showed up, so they took out their communication device and quickly defeated the guards in front of them. With Sieg and Nito combining their use of weapons and magic tools, both of them grew more confident in their ability to defeat Grey Belka. Meanwhile, at Aquarats, Toa went to inform the others of Nito's whereabouts, but Sierra had been awake throughout the conversation and heard what had happened. Nemu wondered if Nito would come back and continue adventuring with them. Toa, despite feeling pathetic for having told Nito she trusted him, assured everyone that Nito would definitely return. She encouraged them, saying that this time they had to be the ones to save Nito, who was in pain, and make sure he would come back to them. In Grey Belka, the team had successfully infiltrated the kingdom and taken down 2 knights. They were Bernard and Mike, who worked under Ares and were known as the Mighty Two of Grey Belka. They earned this title for fighting against the Demon Lord's army and returning safely. After defeating them, the skills Exploding Fist and Goddess's Blessing were unlocked and learned. They wondered why Grey Belka had launched a war against the demons. Alfred explained that it was all Johannes's will. His first wife died of illness, and his second wife was assassinated. Immediately after, he began to act strangely. He launched the war against the demons, and no matter how many casualties occurred, he continued the fight, saying he was proud to sacrifice lives for his own cause. Nito listened carefully, wondering how Alfred knew so much. Before long, one of the knights recognized Alfred and greeted him with contempt, as this knight disliked that Alfred had joined the dragon's heart. Although he didn't want to believe it until he saw it with his own eyes, they had now surrounded the dragon's heart. The lead knight politely requested their surrender, adding that he did not wish to point his sword at his own prince. It turned out that Alfred was the son of Johannes's second wife, a prince of the nation of Grey Belka. Alfred tried to convince the knight that the country was no longer normal, but the knights were enveloped in a powerful pride for their homeland. Even though they were heading down the wrong path, they continued to fight for their friends and family, clinging to the false hope that one day they would find peace. Alfred clearly saw that this was impossible to achieve while Ares and Johannes ruled the country. Even if they were gone, their successors would just repeat the same mistakes. To Alfred, the country was rotten to the core. The knights refused to back down, reasoning that they were just ordinary soldiers, not trying to change Grey Belka. The conversation was going nowhere, so Nito asked if Eliza could use defensive magic. When it was confirmed that she could conjure a water element defensive spell, Nito told her to prepare it for his signal. A fierce battle began as Nito gave the signal and used the skill Goddess's Blood Drop. He attacked the knights while Alfred and Sieg took down several of them. The Goddess's blood drops melted everything they touched, while the barrier Eliza created kept the knights cornered in a tight space, with little chance to evade the drops. With abyss magic, all the knights were annihilated, leaving behind streaks of blood. Sieg ordered everyone to move quickly and told Nito to kill anyone they encountered. The king wondered why the Dragon's Heart party hadn't been captured yet. Ares had another concern, which was how Dragon's Heart knew about the summoning. A spy came in to report that 4 people believed to be members of Dragon's Heart had been spotted. 2 men, Sieg and Alfred, 1 masked individual who couldn't be identified, and a woman named Eliza with wet hair. The spy reported that the masked person was called Nito. Hearing about the losses Grey Belka had suffered, Philip Battler offered to face them on another night. Grog asked Ares to let him join, as he couldn't let his colleague go alone, and promised they would bring back good results. After Philip Battler joined, they showed their courage by volunteering to stop Nito and his comrades in Dragon's Heart. All that was left was to deliver on their promise during the preparations. Grog asked Philip how long he'd had a crush on Princess Ares. Philip had no choice but to open up, revealing he'd had feelings for the princess for quite some time, ever since his student days. When Grog wondered why Philip never confessed to Ares, Philip reminded him that he and the princess were from 2 different worlds. While she was royalty and would only marry nobles, he was just a commoner. Grog told his friend a story about a princess from another country who married a commoner. According to Grog, it was the princess who confessed her feelings to the commoner. In this context, the story seemed to make Philip more hopeful, and he even considered confessing his feelings to Princess Ares if he survived the current mission. Grog wanted Philip to stay optimistic and urged him not to think about dying on this mission. Their light-hearted conversation eventually brought them to their destination, with only a single door separating them from Nito and his comrades. Meanwhile, Nito's group could sense the opposition outside the door. Fortunately, they hadn't come to the castle unprepared. Alfred stepped forward and asked for permission to handle the soldiers outside. He summoned Excalibur, a weapon that only heroes could summon. Nito admired the gleaming sword, recalling Ichijo's words about there being different types of heroes, and deduced that Alfred and Ichijo belonged to the same hero class. Philip and Grog entered to find Alfred, Nito, and the rest of Dragonheart. Philip was surprised by Alfred's presence, and even more so by those accompanying him. Alfred immediately told everyone to be quiet, saying he was well aware he wasn't respected. Alfred then launched a surprise attack, targeting Grog and cutting him down with his deadly weapon. Grog had no time to react and couldn't block Alfred's blow. Grog's lifeless body fell to the ground, leaving his comrade trembling. Alfred noticed Philip's fear and questioned why someone like him was stationed as a guard in the castle. Alfred contemptuously remarked that the standards for soldiers had dropped since he left. Almost as if provoked by Alfred's words, Philip gripped his sword and cast an attribute-enhancing spell to boost his power. He lunged at Alfred, delivering a few slashes. However, Alfred remained vigilant and skillfully dodged Philip's sword attacks. Philip must have been running on pure adrenaline at this point, and he began to chant Ares' name as he launched his next series of attacks. The fight between Philip and Alfred ended as quickly as it began. Despite Philip's best efforts, for Alfred, it was just a warm-up. In just a few moments, Alfred brought the fight to a close, ending any possibility of Philip fighting back by brutally severing his left arm. With no way back and only one arm to survive, Philip knew the fight was lost. Alfred had a sword pointed at Philip, so he could relax and ask a few questions while feeling secure. Alfred was curious about Philip's admiration for Ares and asked if the princess was the reason, as Philip seemed so willing to sacrifice his life. A soldier with such low abilities shouldn't have been entrusted with such an important mission. Alfred pointed out that Philip was just one of countless men who had fallen for Princess Ares. In the end, the princess just used them to satisfy her own desires, without truly caring for any of them. At this point, Philip must have felt a new surge of adrenaline course through his veins as he reacted to Alfred's claims. He screamed at Alfred, telling him to shut up, and lunged at him. Fortunately, Alfred was still on guard and dodged the attack. Alfred continued his story, explaining that everyone who had ever had feelings for Princess Ares met a similar fate. By the time Ares graduated, she had become famous under the title The Head-Chopping Witch. Alfred recalled asking her why she preferred assassination over other things, and from Princess Ares' answer, it was clear that she enjoyed manipulating people to get her desired results, which she considered a pleasure. Meanwhile, Philip refused to believe any of this. He insisted that he wasn't being manipulated and had come here of his own free will. Realizing there was no other way to convince Philip, Alfred decided to end the soldier's suffering with an explosion that would surely kill him. Even at the very end of his life, the last things Philip saw were of Princess Ares and his desire to protect her with his final breath. Philip begged for Princess Ares to stay safe. Meanwhile, in the throne room, King Johannes and Princess Ares had no doubt who had unleashed this explosive magic. They knew this almost certainly meant their guards had been defeated. King Johannes asked if they really needed to send Philip and Grog on that final mission. Princess Ares scoffed coldly, saying that Philip and Grog were replaceable and shouldn't be a big deal. Meanwhile, in the castle hall, Nito stabbed Alfred with his javelin. Alfred was initially terrified, but he calmed down when he realized its purpose was to speed up his magic recovery. Nito did the same for Siki and Eliza. Eliza wondered how Nito could do this without using a magic orb. Nito explained that this magic was just a clever reversal of the cursed javelin he obtained after defeating Gordon. The weapon's traditional purpose was to add a magic-draining debuff to a target. When a person received this debuff, their magic would be reduced. However, by using a clever reversal, you could easily achieve a recovery javelin by doing the opposite. Nito and his friends continued on until they reached the throne room, where King Johannes was most likely located. Eliza promised to support Nito in case anything happened in the throne room. Meanwhile, Nito was lost in thought again, wondering if he could use the clever reversal on his magic tools in the same way he used it for regular magic. He decided to test it and activated the effect on his staff. As a result, he obtained the Great Staff of Belphegor as a new magic tool. What was special about the staff was the presence of a talking demon attached to it. It introduced itself to Nito as Belphegor and called him Master. All right, this is going to be interesting. Nito and the others hadn't yet adjusted to Belphegor's appearance, and from the looks of it, it seemed Belphegor wasn't exactly thrilled with the idea of serving Nito either. In fact, in Belphegor's own words, Nito looked weak as hell. When Eliza remarked that the staff was talking, Belphegor even tried to flirt with her. Nito snapped out of his surprise and asked what kind of creature Belphegor was. The staff explained that it was a part of Nito and existed to carry out his wishes. Nito was still a bit confused, but Alfred and Eliza remembered reading something about this in a book. Nito and his friends decided to complete their mission by heading into the throne room. Their path was blocked by King Johannes's knights, who had achieved mastery in both magic and swordsmanship. If one thing was certain, it was proof that King Johannes was in the throne room. One of the knights cast a spell, and Eliza's counterattack was all it took. When they realized the power of the dragon heart, they decided to combine their magical powers and send them forth. Nito stepped forward, intending to use his power to push them aside while also destroying the throne room door. Sieg insisted that Nito should let them handle this, as he knew Nito's magical power could cause more destruction than intended. Together with Alfred and Eliza, Sieg casts a spell that not only repels the effects of the King's Knight's magic, but also brings down the door itself. The throne room is now wide open. Nito can see the people he was looking for, King Johannes and Princess Aries. However, their path is suddenly blocked by the rubble from the previous spell. As they wonder what to do to clear the debris, Belphegor lends a hand and clears the rubble using a black orb, like a great sphere of destruction that swallows everything in its path. Nito and his friends step into the throne room, announcing they've come to make King Johannes pay for his sin of performing the hero summoning, along with Princess Aries and everyone else involved. Sieg declares that they will all meet their end right here in this very throne room. Princess Aries laughs out loud at Sieg's words, asserting that they have no proof she performed the hero summoning and that Dragonheart is just carrying out an act of terrorism on a whim. She turns the threat back on them, saying that they will be the ones who won't leave the throne room alive. Just then, the minions in the throne room move to attack Dragonheart, while Princess Aries activates Transfield and uses Transmethus, a high-speed teleportation spell that makes it difficult to predict her location. With the situation as it is, Dragonheart has no answer for her latest antics, so it seems she has once again escaped their grasp. Meanwhile, Nito calmly asks his friends to handle the rest, while he goes after the princess. He activates Soil Break and catches up to the princess with every step she takes, almost instantly. Princess Aries demands Nito release her immediately, but Nito reveals that he has waited for this day for a very long time, the day he could kill Aries with his own two hands. His thirst and hunger for revenge are the only things clear about Nito right now. He wants to take revenge on Princess Aries, but first, he wants her to know that his quest for vengeance is purely personal and for no other reason. Meanwhile, Princess Aries hasn't recognized Nito until now. She wonders who this strange yet powerful man is. Nito throws her to the ground and prepares to exact his revenge. Slowly, painfully, he informs Aries that although she once knew him, the person she knew no longer exists. At that moment, the mages in the throne room turn their attention to the fight between Nito and the princess. They order him to leave the princess alone at once, but they've picked the wrong fight and almost immediately regret it. After sending blasts their way, Sieg encourages Nito to focus on the princess and the king, promising to handle anything else that might come at them. Nito agrees, and then uses Odium Aura to enhance their attack and defense, indirectly helping them in their battle. Eliza wonders how Nito could have just cast that spell from such a distance without a magic circle. Sieg also wonders about Nito's impressive power and points out that his blackish-red aura also has a crimson glow in his left eye. Now, Sieg wonders how much Nito has changed since they first met. While acknowledging that Nito looks and feels completely different from back then, he concludes that there's no point in dwelling on it right now. With their enhanced power, Dragonheart finds defeating the minions is easier than taking candy from a baby. Meanwhile, Nito makes Aries watch her comrades die and promises that she will be next. At this point, King Johannes decides to intervene. The king orders Nito to release his daughter. When Nito does so, the king decides to join the fight by activating Sand Javelin and aiming it at Nito. Nito activates Soil Break, shattering the javelin before he even breaks a sweat. The king tries another attack and creates a rock lance, but Nito destroys it even faster than the first one. Both King Johannes and Princess Aries are rendered speechless. Aries cries out that Nito destroyed the magic formula. Impressed, Nito gives her something else to deal with by activating phantom pain on King Johannes. The king can't bear the pain and begins to scream. Aries finds it difficult to watch her father being tortured, but Nito finds it a fitting time for an explanation. He reveals that he acquired phantom pain by activating mischievous reversal on a magic bullet, a skill that was cast by one of the soldiers not long ago. Meanwhile, King Johannes is still suffering from phantom pain and was almost at his limit. Aries cried out to her father, saying that he could be crippled if the torture continued. Nito revealed that harming the king wasn't much of a stretch, since the king and princess had once tortured others to the point of injury to force them to perform the hero summoning ritual. Nito felt overjoyed that he was about to rid the world of two evil people, so he had no reason to feel guilty. Princess Aries thought about the best way to save her father. She realized that Nito was distracted by torturing the king, so he probably wouldn't notice if she snuck up on him to stab him with her uninjured arm. She moved silently and almost reached Nito's position. Unfortunately, Nito noticed that she had been quiet for a while and sensed something was wrong. He turned around and saw her advancing on him, so he pushed her down again. Nito released the king from phantom pain by using effect heal. The king suddenly stopped feeling pain and curiously asked why. Nito clarified that he had no intention of letting the king die like that. First, King Johannes had to know the true meaning of suffering. Nito activated phantom pain again and then activated effect heal. A while later, he repeated this process several times, and the king was now at his breaking point. Aries cried and begged for her father, making Nito wonder why even the most wicked people still had a soft spot for someone. Aries begged for her father's life again, saying he was her only family. Her words annoyed Nito. He pointed out the hypocrisy in them, saying that many of the people she had killed were probably also someone's last remaining family. Nito activated Diaz Bloodly, causing blood to drip from the ceiling and touch the king. As King Johannes grew tired of fighting for his life, he looked at his daughter one last time before falling down dead as the ceiling was destroyed. Nito ordered Belphegor to clean up the ceiling just as it had cleared the rubble. The staff obeyed, once again activating the black air. Meanwhile, Aries, who had witnessed Nito's magical power, wondered how he could perform all these things that were previously unheard of. The princess also wondered why such a talented mage had kept himself hidden until now. She expressed her frustration and demanded to know why he was deliberately torturing them so painfully when he could have easily killed them instantly. Nito decided to explain it to her. He told her that he just wanted to be a normal mage like everyone else. But when that didn't happen and he became a healer, she cast him out just because of his profession. Nito's story finally made the princess remember, but she couldn't believe he was still alive. However, she tried to justify her actions by pointing out that she had teleported Nito away back then instead of simply killing him. But Nito fully understood the intention behind that teleportation. He made it clear to Aries that she was the very reason he gained the power for revenge. Just then, Princess Aries called out his name, Hidaka Masamune. Nito asserted to Aries that she had lost the battle because she was so sure she had destroyed him. He was also surprised that she even remembered his name. He whispered that what he had learned about people in this world is that everyone treats healers like trash. Aries, still in pain, said that he was a different kind of healer. Nito insisted that she wouldn't understand the source of his power, even if he sat down to explain it to her again. He brought up the fact that he was exiled from the country just for being an ordinary healer. The princess now grew desperate, so Aries suggested that it wasn't too late for Nito to go back to his friends and become a great magician. Nito had already died once in his old world, but these people had interfered and brought him to this one, only to pair him with people he didn't want to see and who treated him like trash all over again. He declared that there was no way he could ever get along with her or the others she had just called his friends. Meanwhile, Sieg informed Nito that their mission was complete. All that was left was for him to finish off the princess. He said he planned to do it quickly, Now, he asked about the status of his classmates, especially the kind Sieg and Ichijo, who had always been an interesting character. Aries said they were doing very well. Nito asked what would happen if the opposite were true, and whether she would perform another summoning. While talking, Nito activated Soul Break, dispelling the teleportation circle the princess had been quietly working on. He explained to Sieg that he was fully aware of her ability to make her teleportation circles invisible. Nito could see she was secretly planning something from the look in her eyes. Unsurprisingly, she always prioritized her own safety over anyone else's. Nito activated Phantom Pain and Effect Heal on Aries, just as he had done to her father a few minutes ago. He made it clear that she was so disgusting, he might accidentally kill her. He severed her right arm with his weapon, and she could no longer scream. He then proceeded to sever her left arm, then activated his healer's recovery magic to stop the bleeding. This way, he mocked her by helping her with the very power she had once cast aside. She still insisted that he was special, since he wasn't an ordinary healer, so he proceeded to sever her legs, leaving her completely limbless. Even in that situation, Aries shamelessly begged for her life. Nito asked if she was willing to live the rest of her life without any limbs. He ignored her endless pleas from that point on, and ended her life by crushing her head under his foot. Now, both King Johannes and Princess Aries were dead, and his revenge was complete. Meanwhile, Nito sensed that his Dragonheart comrades were watching from behind. He admitted to them that his recent victims were killed purely for personal grudges and nothing more. Nito confessed that he didn't have the same sense of justice as the others, so he said he would completely understand if they withdrew their invitation for him to join their organization. Sieg clarified that the Dragonheart organization didn't particularly care about justice. If they truly did, they would have had to put everyone through a trial before killing them. Sieg said that if they followed the process of justice, it would take a very long time to bring Aries and the others to true justice, which could mean more sacrifices. Sieg emphasized that since Nito had plenty of time to think and still chose to proceed, his actions must have been necessary. Nito knew it was necessary, but he still felt like something was missing. Alfred spoke about the terrible treatment he suffered at Aries' hands, including the death of his mother. Therefore, he said he had no regrets about her death. But he did feel a bit of guilt and suggested that Nito might be feeling the same way. Nito decided to leave that question unanswered, telling them to contact him if anything happened, which clearly meant he had agreed to join the organization. However, Nito stressed that he wasn't giving a yes or no answer. At this point, they were ready to leave the castle and teleport to Mira's inn. However, Nito kept staring at the castle, as if he still had something on his mind. He remembered his promise to erase this country along with Aries, so he wondered if he could fulfill that promise by simply destroying the castle, the symbol of the king's power. Sieg approved, saying that destroying the castle might prevent future hero summonings. Nito asked Belphegor to do the job to erase the castle and its surrounding area. Belphegor activated Black Air once again, and this time it was larger than all the previous times combined. The pit of destruction even went beyond the castle and started spreading out of the castle grounds, worrying Nito and the others. Belphegor asserted that he was a part of Nito and was simply following Nito's innate desires. He said that no one would be destroyed unless Nito wished for it. Just as Belphegor said, everything was over in just a few minutes. The castle had vanished, but the surrounding citizens remained. On this day, Nito and Dragonheart defeated Grey Belka,